Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much for the general public to join our monthly LPEA board meeting. Thank you all the board members for joining, and thank you for the staff. We have a pretty packed meeting today. Lots of stuff to cover, and we're going to go ahead and call this meeting to order. And the first thing we'd like to do is, even though it's on Zoom, a little atypical from how we all grew up, but I'd like everybody to take a moment and stand and offer the Pledge of Allegiance. That would be great. Okay. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Okay, so first item here is to go ahead. I need a motion to approve the agenda.
This is Kohler. I will make a motion to approve it with one change, and it is my understanding that under 5F1 Resolution 2021-16 is not going to be addressed today. If that is correct, then I move to approve it.
Second.
Terrific. Okay, so all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Any abstained? Okay, the agenda is passed. Thank you for that. So let's now move. Do we have any member commentary? We'll do public comments today at this stage. Do we have anybody in the waiting room?
We have 3 attendees. I do not see any hands raised.
Okay. Just give them another moment here in case somebody's fiddling with their computer. Okay. Well, if there's no public commentary, then let's move to the first item for the board to act on. So we are looking at item number 3 on the agenda, and this is to approve the consent board items as a package. If you recall, we did this last time. If you wish to have any of these items from the consent board items removed for discussion, you don't need a vote. You can just hold your hand up and say, I'd like something removed. It gets pulled from the package. We'll discuss it individually. But absent that, then we would vote to approve the board consent items as a whole. So does anybody have anything we'd like to remove? There we go. Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah, I'd like to remove resolution 2021-13. Just don't want resolutions and consent items.
Fair enough. Then it is removed. Any other items? Tim Wheeler, go ahead.
Yeah, I have a minor correction on the cow minutes. So I don't know if you want to remove it or I could just email.
Graham, what's the right?
I think we can do non-substantive adjustments via the consent agenda still. So if you sort of have, you want to announce the minor adjustments that you would like to make to the cow minutes, I think we can still keep it on the consent agenda.
So in the LPEA directors, it lists the president and VP, but it doesn't mention the secretary and treasurer designation for Bob and Dan respectively. So I just think that's a little inconsistent compared to what we do with the other minutes. So either all are removed or we designate each of the officers.
That's a good catch. We'll get all the officers designated as we would at the normal board meeting. Get that taken care of.
That's all I have. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you. Rachel, you had yours hand up. Go ahead.
Thank you. Yeah, I was just gonna pull out the travel and training requests. I can't get that link to work.
Sorry, so are you just asking for somebody to resend you the link that sure this work, or you want to pull it from the consent package for discussion?
I'd love to pull it just because I'm guessing if someone could send the link and we could pull it, then I can review.
That sounds great. Okay.
Is there an active link? Because when I click, it says here, there's nothing that comes up either. I assumed there was nothing behind it, but
There should be. So on, Janelle, you're going to have to answer this, please, because we tested this on the board docs where you can go to the link and we've been, so it'd be good to know if you guys can't get into it.
yeah, it's not populating anything when I click on the here word.
Okay, what about in your emails that I sent with the links in there as well?
Oh, I haven't. Yeah, I'd have to look at that.
Okay.
Has anyone tried the link from the email that Janelle sent asking to add your travel and training to the link via the email she has sent last week?
That worked.
That worked. Thank you, Kirsten. So please go to the email and add your travel and training to that link. And then John, maybe what we could do is circle back once people have an opportunity to populate that.
Yeah, and I can take that as a to-do. I'm guessing the director point maybe doesn't respect the hyperlink on the iPad. On the computer version, it seems to work fine. So I'll look into that.
Okay, it looks like Chanel just resent it. And okay. So everybody want to take a moment and pop open the link that all right, I'll get lost here. Just give me 1 second. I thought I was looking at the right document. Yeah. Okay. All right. I'm sorry. I think, are we looking at 2 documents here? Because the one I pulled down was from the sheriff or director point.
The email link works. That does work. I clicked where Janelle sent that. So
Yeah, it's open, active, and people are filling it in now. So
okay.
looks like a Google Doc.
So I noticed that we have dates of training for October filled in our August spots. I just wanted to bring that to your guys' attention that down at the bottom, you'll see the months is August, September, and October.
Oh.
That's not how it shows up on the iPad. The iPad seemed to do funny things with Google Sheets.
Can we
Okay.
take these out of the consent things and do the consent things and then do the proposed bylaw amendment and then later on today do the travel and training? Would that make sense?
Sure. That is a good suggestion. Let's do it that way. So if you haven't read these documents, let's make sure you either at the break or you get a chance to do that, and we'll return to it at the end. It is, okay. So yeah, so let's go ahead. So we have removed, so I'm sorry, so let's double back. So Rachel, do you want to, we're gonna leave this out per your request. And then Kirsten, you sure you want to pull this, the last thing out? We've discussed it a couple of times now. It's not really being,
Yeah, what
not
I'd
really
like
much left to discuss. You're right to do that. If you had a specific thing you wanted to address inside it.
Yeah, I get there's probably not going to be any discussion. I just don't want a resolution as part of a consent part. So as soon as we do the consent, I'm going to move that we accept 2021-13.
Fair enough. Okay, fair enough. Then let's move forward with that. So all in favor of approving the consent items as submitted, minus the resolution 2021-13 and minus the director expense approval and training and travel and training, or you wanted them both out or just one out, Rachel?
Point of order, John.
Yes, hang on, Rachel, finish your thought, please.
Let's just pull them both out. Travel and training requests. Is that what that was the question?
That's
Just
one.
the travel
That's
and
the one you
training
asked for.
requests.
Terrific. Okay, and then somebody had a point of order.
Yeah, Dan, I think we need a motion, or did I miss it? We need a motion and a second to approve this.
That's what I was trying to. That's what I was trying to articulate. So we need a motion to approve the consent board items minus travel and training and minus the resolution 2021. Can I have that motion, please?
I'll make that motion.
Thank
Rachel,
you, sir.
second.
Terrific. Rachel's the second. All in favor? Put your hand up so we can see it. Say aye. All
Aye.
opposed? Say no. Any abstained? Excellent. All right. So now let's tackle resolution 2113, Civil Unions Bylaws Amendment. This has been discussed multiple times at this point, but Kristen, you asked to remove it. Anything you'd like to add or comment on? Or
I would like to move we accept resolution, or that we pass resolution 2021-13.
terrific. Do we have a second?
Second by Kohler.
Terrific. Thank you, Kohler. All in favor, hold your hand up, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? No. Any abstentions? Hold your hand up. Motion passes. Thank you. Okay, now back to the item here on travel and training. We can tackle this right now, or if everybody is now just sort of needs a few more minutes to look at it, you can look at it at the break and we can return to it in the afternoon. Or if you've had a chance to look at it, we can take care of it right now.
Can we look at it a little later, just because some people are still filling it in, and I didn't realize it was in the August one, so we need to transmit that over to October. So if we could wait a little bit, I think it'd be better, please.
Okay, thanks for that comment. Kirsten, did you still have your hand up? Okay, then absent anybody objecting, we'll take care of it in a couple hours. So let's plan to do that after the lunch break. And Graham, if you could make a note of that so we doesn't slip our mind. We'll come back to that after. We'll do it right after lunch. Okay. Terrific. All right, so let's move on to CEO and staff reports. And we're going to start. So we're on section 4A, the division dashboard. So who wants to go? Jessica, are you driving this, or are you handing this straight away to somebody else?
No, I'm driving it. So can everyone see this okay? Trying to make it big so people can see it. Perfect.
Yep.
Okay.
That's good. Terrific.
So it's amazing how fast this time is going. It's August already. This is a really fun picture, actually. This was the Hotline School in Mesa County and Grand Junction. So if no one's been there, it's a really awesome location, training location, and fun to see all the men and women. Got to see a number of linemen women also out there climbing the poles and working. So that was really fun. So as I mentioned before, I'll go through these. I won't go into detail because they're in your packet, but I do want to call out a few key items. So again, our status is all green checks, nothing of caution and nothing of concern. So that is good news. And then Carl will go into the financial report after. And I'm going to cruise somewhat through these just to get to some of the items that I think are really spectacular from staff that I think the board would be interested in. But of course, you all know about the partial contract work and broadband work. That's been a lot of work of staff, weekends, nights. I'll give a small update at the executive session just due to settlement discussions going on this. Great news, no accidents, pretty consistent COVID cases. We did go back to masks in the office. So just to make sure that we're protecting against Delta. So I'm going to cruise down here to two things that I think are really fantastic. It's these, and Carl is posted, I believe, the KRTA report to the Google Docs. If you'd like to look through those, I would encourage you to do that. He's also going to write up a quick memo for staff and one that I can share with the board on some of the key elements in the KRT report, but it does still show us achieving our energy rates lower than 70% of our Colorado co-op peers. So as you all know, that was the carbon goal that was set a couple of years ago before my time. And it also, while it required the carbon goal, it also made sure that we're not impacting our rates to our membership. So we're happy to report that we're still working on carbon reductions, even with our own internal fleets. That's another reason why we're purchasing the two F-150s that are all electric, because whenever one of our trucks is no longer workable or safe for our crews, when we replace them, we're trying to look at replacements for all electric vehicles. Also with strong financial indicators, this is, Carl and his team has done a great job. Our 2020 KRT report shows the LPEA reported its strongest financial performance in the 5 years that the KRT report shows. It only goes back 5 years. But when Carl looked through all of our finances, it's over 10 years. So we have the strongest finances in the last 10 years. And that's in terms of our MDSE, O-tier controllable costs. So I'm really proud of the staff for that, because a lot of this effort was in them managing their budgets, which they never did before. The CFO previously had his budget, but the VP of operations or communications, they never had their own budgets to manage. And so Carl and I worked on that since he started, so that everyone has way more visibility and accountability on everything they're doing. And so that's allowed us to find cost savings. So really wanted to shout that out to the finance group. And that's it. So now we're ready for questions. So John, do you just want me to call them out? I think I can read what you're saying. Yeah, we can't hear you.
Sorry, I was on mute and saying that. Yeah, I'll do the call outs. Let's start with Holly.
Great, thank you. Thank you so much, Jessica, for that report. You started actually a couple months after I did on this board of directors. And for several months when you first started, you talked about the siloed budgets that, existed in LPEA, and how you were working towards kind of breaking that down and giving each department, ownership of those decisions and greater authority. And so I listened every month to that. And at some point you had to finally say when, because we didn't have Carl yet. And so over the course of my tenure on this board, I've just seen amazing things. One of my favorite definitions of leadership is taking personal responsibility to grow leadership in other people. And I think that you are an exemplary example of that. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thanks to the whole staff. Awesome work.
For sure.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Holly. Sue, you're up.
All right, great, thank you. Carl, when you post or you do the memo on the KTRA, will you also send us a link so we can find it easily in the Google Docs?
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you so much. I'd appreciate that. Good work, staff.
Excellent. Thank you, Sue. Tim, you're up.
Yeah, this might be a little picky, but I appreciate really a lot how hard everyone has worked, and the finances are, as you say, in great shape, better than they've been a long time. But I do think that the goal was not necessarily supplying cheaper energy, but to have our rates, which include more than just energy, lower than our peers, 70% of our peers. So I just kind of want to make sure we understand that it's not just the energy rate that we're talking here, but the overall rate that our members pay. And yeah, that's probably an internal thing, but we in that wording, but I want to make sure that's pointed out. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks,
And
Tim.
just so you know, that metric does encompass everything. It's not just energy. It's energy-based charge, demand charges, everything.
Thanks for clarifying, Tim. That's a good clarification point.
Great. Okay, Rachel, you're up.
Thank you. First, it's just a procedural question. So we are just supposed to ask about the highlights now, and then we're going to go into the next the kind of broken down reports, or is this where we're supposed to ask all those questions?
This is where you can ask everything in the dashboard.
Okay, perfect. And then, John, I'm going to just keep asking every president at all times to just help facilitate this so we're not such ping pong balls. So if you can maybe break us down. Anyone got questions on executive? Then move on to media and comms, things like that, just because otherwise I feel like we lose the train of thought. So that would just be a request again.
Sure.
Your choice if you follow that.
Terrific. And definitely, I mean, the intention here is to not go page by page, since the vast majority of the presentation is, sort of broadly covered. It is just not contentious or anything. But if you do see stuff, let's call it out. This is the moment.
Yeah, and so I guess there's a bunch of things. I'll just start with one and then keep working just to learn. But I'm really, let's see, I was looking at the rebate analysis, and when is that available? Is it in the drive or up on the website?
Yeah, I'm sorry, which rebate analysis, Rachel?
It was mentioned as a highlight. Completed cost analysis of beneficial electrification technologies to inform and enhance rebate strategy.
Sure. Hillary, do you want to answer that?
And I'm sorry, Rachel, what was your specific question around that? It was just more information on that process?
No, just if that report is available for review anywhere or will be coming down the road.
No, I mean, so that was a very initial analysis that actually Dan's team crunched all the numbers and processed. And the idea is that we're really trying to get in on a lot of this new construction, and we're trying to make sure that our rebates are enough to offset enough to incentivize members to go electric on these various types of technologies, especially on new builds, but also when people's heating systems fail and everything like that. And our current rebates weren't necessarily enough to really offset that upfront cost. And so Dan's teams crunched the numbers. We pulled together enough of an analysis to make a proposal as far as our budgeting for next year, but the exact design of the programs we're actually meeting about tomorrow. So we're going to be kind of crafting that, and that is something we could share with you guys later.
Thank you.
Okay, Bob, go for it. You're on.
Yeah, just a real quick highlight. One of the really important things that Jessica and the staff and Dan really got after when they first got here was the whole picture of margins, where previously we were feeling pretty good about margins, but and even though it was in the report, we weren't focused on our own operating margins, because the margins that come from our G&T, they get added in there later, and we were often looking at that. So I just want to point out that the focus on improving our own internal margins was one of the things that Jessica really got her eye on the ball on, and that's helped improve the overall health of LPEA, and Carl's helped make that happen in everyone. So that's one of the big levers or focus areas that made a big difference in getting the health of these financials where they are today. So congrats on that.
Thanks, Bob. Appreciate that. Kohler, you're up.
So my first question is on the statement of operations, and I have it as page 34 of 97. And under the last section there, I guess you'd call it non-operating incomes, there's the income and loss from equity investments. And it's quite a bit different this year as it was from last year. And the month of August is quite a bit different than the month of August last year. And I would think our equity investments would be somewhat the same. Could you maybe give me an idea why that's lower this year than last year? And I do have another question after this one.
That's me, I think.
Yeah, I think it'd be you, Carl.
Hang on, Carl, before you dig in here, are you going to cover that specific question in your report through your normal report? You want to hold answering that question, or you want to?
Sure, let's do that. That sounds good.
You okay with that, Kohler? Because he says he's already.
Yeah.
Okay. Question number 2.
I'm fine with that. So question 2 is on page 60 of 97, the outage summary by cause. And I don't know why I haven't thought about this before, but I was wondering if someone could tell me the difference between the equipment or installation design and planned outage. Because when I think about it, I would think an installation is a planned outage. Same with equipment, but maybe I don't understand what equipment and installation design is and why that creates an outage.
Yeah, and that would be a good question for Derek. Sorry, Derek.
Right on, Derek.
You're up. Let's hear
it. All right, good morning. So Kohler, the planned outage, is self-explanatory as planned outage. The equipment, I'm sorry, what was the words again? Equipment?
Equipment or installation / design.
Okay. To me, so the way I look at that is that is what, it was a failure on that part. The outage was due to the equipment or the installation. It was a poor installation. It was, the equipment failed.
So, and I was wondering if that was the case. So it's actually fairly high as far as outages. Then we have a lot of failures. Is that considered pretty high for failures with equipment and
with the wire fails? I'm assuming that's what we're looking at is underground wire failure, and we've been experiencing a lot of that. Yes.
And Kohler, if you think about the couple of really big outages we've had lately, one on the west side circuit and then one on Bodo Park. And I'm trying to remember the 46 outage, Derek, what the root cause of that was. But I know the other two could have been classified as that equipment outage because we had some elbows that were bad or installed incorrectly.
Correct. Yes, the west side outage was a burned up jumper and a blown up elbow.
Perfect. Thank you for the understanding. Appreciate it.
Great, Kohler. Thanks. And if we don't get your first question answered when Carl presents, definitely pop your hand back up so we make sure we address it. Sue, you're up.
Thanks. Mine's just a request to the rest of the board members. We do have questions. Just like Kohler did a minute ago, please let us know what page you're on so that we can follow along with that. I'd appreciate it.
Great suggestion. Thank you. Rachel, you're back. What do you got?
Okay, I'm bouncing from financials to try to get to where my question was. Sorry, hold on. Let's see. This one was, okay, page 51, HBASC event, the Home Builders Association. And I was just reflecting, reading on this, on some of our earlier conversations we had between the city council and the LPA board. And just there were some interesting things that came out of that on aligning, policy and procedure and procedure. I'm just curious if in that event, because you were gathering all the builders, were there any big themes that came up from that? Whether things they really appreciate that we are doing or feedback they gave on how we can better support what they're up to?
So that event, it's a part of the HBSC's kind of Lunch and Learn series. It was the last one that they did. And towards the very end, they just realized they probably should have been doing breakfast series because it's hard for the contractors to get off the job and then come in for lunch. It's much easier for them to swing by at 7 a.m., grab a burrito and get a presentation. So that's what we'll be doing next time. So because of that, this one wasn't that well attended. I think we only had 7 or 8 folks there. So as far as themes, no, they were, interested to hear about our rebates. They really enjoyed the electric safety demonstration that our team gave. I think seeing an arc flash for the first time can be very, very humbling and powerful for people. But we are continuing our engagement with HBASC. We're a panelist on a lot of their events, and we're also starting discussions with them about how we might be able to collaborate on building code type work and how we might be able to engage with the other players in the region around those type of things.
Awesome, thank you. And then just one other kind of, again, community response style question. This is from page 55. Just noting, we've had our resolution around broadband, and I saw Carl at the county ARPA meeting last night. I see Jessica meeting with Sue and Southwest COG. So what's the response been from the players? Is there anything new, different, other? I know one of the concerns we had, or not concerns, but challenge/opportunity areas we had talked about was, there's a lot of people doing this work, and really it's that coordination function that would be so helpful. So yeah, any kind of general impressions of how it's going and if we're slotting ourselves into coordination land?
Yeah, good question. So nothing really has moved yet. There was this event yesterday that you were at. Unfortunately, I'm in deep conversations with Tri-State to lock us up on our settlement, so I couldn't attend, but Carl attended, and he said that he was the only one in the breakout room on broadband, which was telling. So we have to keep that in mind, that it sounds like the community is not as interested maybe as we thought, or there's another reason, which we do think is the reason, is because the community also knows, county members, the state, that there's a lot of federal dollars coming down with the infrastructure package. So maybe it's the best use of dollars to use these ARP funds for other infrastructure projects. The ones you spoke to, probably what John Lee was there for, maybe fire mitigation, protection of infrastructure, and they would reserve broadband funds to be spent using this infrastructure bill that is coming, because there are pretty significant buckets in there. I continue to have pretty much a weekly call with the state broadband office on these issues to stay apprised. The tribe and us have pretty much bi-weekly calls. I just had a call with them yesterday. Southwest COG is a weekly effort. I'm now talking to Fast Track as well. Kelly Hubbard and I are coordinating. So yes, we are just trying to all come together and make sure we're doing this as a team instead of individuals applying for grants. So that's the update.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Holly, what do you got?
Thanks, Rachel, for asking that question. It was on my list too. I just wanted to say kudos to for sharing the code of excellence that a good portion of the staff worked on with the PUD, Grant PUD in Washington. But my real question is on page, oh, criminy. Sorry about that. This is on page 64. And I think this is going to be a Carl question, but it was a little bit unclear. And as the new chairperson of the Colorado Co-op CFO group, the VP of Finance coordinated a budgeting roundtable with representatives from other Colorado co-ops. And that sounded like a really interesting idea to me. And I was just kind of curious what your goal is with that organization and if you're the chairperson.
Yeah, I am the new chairperson. I've been attending the group pretty much since I started here. It was actually started by Bill Mertz from San Miguel. He's now moved on to a co-op in Wyoming, so we had to kick him out because he left the state. So I've taken over, and it's really, we get together for an hour at lunchtimes and just bat around best practices, things that we've seen, and share information with our peers. So myself and Monica from my team both attend, so we get kind of CFOs and controllers from most of the co-ops in Colorado are represented.
Great, thank you.
Terrific. Rachel, go ahead.
Thanks. Yeah, I was just mulling over, typing my notes up on the broadband component and just checking in, thinking about, as you mentioned, Jessica, and as we all know, y'all are shoulders deep in the power supply discussions, negotiations, all of that. And I know with the broadband thing, that's a new resolution. It's also could be a huge lift. I just don't know. But do you all have the capacity and resources you need to be able to tackle that sufficiently? Or is that something?
Yeah, Rachel, it's a great question. No, we don't. And I can see Dan waiting to see what I was going to say. No, I mean, I'll be honest, we are at full capacity. I mean, we're working nights, weekends, early mornings to work on this stuff. But here's the good news is that in working with Southwest COG, they are going to ask for and search grant money to hire a full-time broadband coordinator that we would be able to utilize that would coordinate these functions and actually go out and actively apply for grants. And so I think that is going to help us out pretty significantly.
That is awesome to hear. Okay.
Yeah.
Good work.
Yeah. Thank you.
Terrific. Okay, let's push on to Carl. The floor is yours for the financial report, please.
Thank you. Okay, so hopefully that's filling your screen with a splash page for August 2021 financials. And moving into our financial goals, nice 5 check marks, as was the case last month. Margins well in excess of our approved goal, as we've touched on before, mainly driven by cost reductions. We did see in August our gross margin, so that's revenue less cost of power, was higher than we had budgeted, and that was 2 factors involved in that. Is that one, we have the 2% rate reduction from Tri-State that obviously we did not budget for, and we're going to be seeing that every month till the end of 2021. But the other part was we were significantly over budget on residential sales, around 12%, and also under budget on industrial sales. And as I think we've discussed a few times, the margins on residential sales are higher than they are on industrial. So I'm not entirely clear what drove such high residential sales in August. That's not what I had anticipated, because usually hot weather, hot weather in the summer will drive AC load. I don't recall August being that hot, especially not compared to July. So that was interesting, and we need to keep our eye on it. Everything else was kind of what we've been seeing in these last few months. Expenses were very close to budget. Some of our line items were higher, some were lower, and they kind of netted out to pretty much where we had budgeted. We were slightly under on our expenses. All of the key debt ratios, equity, long-term debt, debt coverage, all comfortably over where we need them to be. At this point, looking at margins, although that's operating margin, and Cola's question was on our non-operating margins, the equity investments. That line is really our income from Fast Track. So the main reason that it's lower than last year is we have, I think we mentioned it last month, the accounting group has taken on some of the finance work for Fast Track since their accountant left, and just through sheer volume of work, they have not managed to conclude the August financials, so those aren't factored in. So that's one of the reasons why that's slightly lower. And Fast Track is not recording the same income this year as they did last year. So we have very little control on what that line is going to be, whether it's high or low. So hopefully that answers your question, Cola. So on to highlights. So for the year, we're $1.5 million under forecast on our operating costs. Labor.
Is it, Carl? Don Lee, is it just me who's barely hearing this? The microphone's going in and out and it's falling off. Is it just my internet, or are we all only getting part of it?
John, I think it's everyone. I was actually going to send a suggestion to Carl. In the meantime, Carl, you may just speak up.
Okay, let me try something real quick. Yeah, I see.
Mute now.
Now you're muted. You're still muted. Still can hear you.
Try now.
There you go. We can hear you.
Is it very low though?
I can hear you.
Kind of wavers back and forth.
Sorry about that. I will try and boom a little more.
Hey, Carl, before we, do you want to, Kirsten has her hand up. Do you want to take questions on the fly, or you want to take all your questions at the end?
This is the last slide, so if I just get through this and then I'll take questions.
Terrific. All right, Kirsten, you're up. You're up when he's done on this slide.
Okay, so total operating costs, $1.5 million below forecast for the year. We're right on with our labor costs for August. Delinquent accounts, once again, virtually nothing. You know, we've got $2,000 or $3,000 on a book of around 10 million. Our electric sales, this is the only one not in green, with 2.3% below forecast. But as I touched on for the month of August, the residential sales have been very robust. Industrial is where we are seeing lower loads. So there's less impact on our gross margins, which, as you can see, are $1 million over forecast so far this year. And getting to our operating margin is around $2.6 million over forecast as of the end of August. And I would anticipate that would rise to about 3 million by the end of 2021.
That's awesome.
Okay, questions? Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Christian, you're up. And you're on mute. Are you? No, can't hear you. Cannot hear you. Still cannot hear you.
Sorry, I muted my phone too. Okay.
There you go. You're up.
Okay. Carl, when you were answering Kohler's question about margins, you brought up fast track, and I'm used to, the only time we ever see fast track numbers is one in Tim's report, but also during the audit when we have to do a combined. Please explain to me again where fast track came in on the equity margin.
Sure. When you see lower down on the income statement, underneath operating margins, you'll see a line saying income/loss from equity investments. That is essentially fast track.
So
Page 36.
Thank you. So again, so the only place that we see fast track is in the equity section. We won't see it in page 36. Here I am.
You see it on the balance sheet as well.
Yeah, the income loss from equity investments. So this is where we see fast track, and to Tim's point, we also see it on the balance sheet. But we don't see it anywhere else, right?
Correct.
Okay. And that income loss does change monthly?
Yes.
Okay, so it's not a year-end roundup. Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate the education.
No problem.
Perfect. Thank you. Tim Wheeler, you're up.
I got to remember my question.
You want me to come back to you?
Yeah, come back.
You bet. Rachel, you're up.
Oh, okay. I'm referring to page 41. I was just thinking about, Carl, you mentioned, industrial loads being below budgeted amounts, and that's consistent. That's a theme and a trend over multiple years. And I'm curious what sort of, and as you all speak about it, I know the margins on that are lower. There's always it never seems a worrying factor to you all, even though it comprises, I'm trying to look at the pie charts on page 40. Oh, my internet won't do it. Even though it comprises, 22% of our income and or our revenue, excuse me. But I'm just curious. I know we have a cost of service study coming forward. Are we gonna have, or is it realistic to get like a 5-year projection of where we think those industrial loads will be and impacts on the cooperative and some of those pieces? I'm thinking about this in particular as we've been looking at kind of our power supply and some of the numbers and this and that, and I might be conflating things, but maybe Dan, at some point, if you could, Dan and Carl, educate at least me on kind of how we think of the industrial load in its grand holistic form, that would be helpful.
I'll give just a real quick thing on that. We view industrial loads as very susceptible to disappearing any given day of the year. For instance, this month, BP had another, actually it's not BP anymore, but I won't say the name. There's another compressor that drops offline, and they fix it and they bring it on and it drops off. So that's why we want those rates dialed in so carefully, and that we don't rely on those loads, because they could be gone tomorrow, just as you're seeing. Now we're in the midst of doing our load forecasting right now. And so Cliff's asking me, well, what should I forecast for these industrial loads? And I'm like, well, less than you did last year is typically where we're headed with some of those. And we try to communicate with them. Well, we do communicate with them. And they try to give us their best projection on what's going on, but they don't even know for sure what's going to happen. So we do our best there. We've learned to probably back it off a little bit more from what they've told us. So we're going to do that even a little more aggressively this year.
Thanks, Dan. Tim, on your question.
Yeah, Carl, and perhaps Dan as well. The residential load surprise in terms of increase, I wonder if that isn't also related to people utilizing air conditioning more often because of smoke in the air rather than just heat. I know I'm looking at changing out my furnace, and the place I live, I really don't need air conditioning, but in talking to some contractors about a heat pump, they said, oh, well, you get this air conditioning, and if you have a bad smoke day or whatever, you can close up your house and filter the air. So, might be something to think about in the forecast going forward, to the extent that there's going to be smoke from climate change and other issues. I think you're going to find more people want air conditioning because they can't cool their house anymore by just opening the windows. So just a thought.
All right, thank you. Okay, Kirsten, you're back.
Yeah, I think it would be worthwhile with the industrials, and it has to be done in executive session, to have a brief discussion about where the industrials are, and also where that kind of rate comes and how Tri-State is involved in it. But it all has to be in executive session. Maybe not today, but if we could put that on a future, I think we could all use that quick reminder and or new education.
Yeah, that's a good suggestion. I think there's a couple of areas that either a lunch and learn, it doesn't necessarily have to be on a board meeting, either a lunch and learn or a written FAQ if there's just some baseline questions, not just for this particular group, but for future board members. I certainly, when I was coming online a year ago, I found historical stuff where that kind of baseline discussion was pretty valuable when it was in writing. So maybe as a way to start some of those discussions is to maybe we can get an email thread going about where we think, industrial is an interesting area to dig in a little bit deeper on. A couple of questions around how we're doing, how we're reporting our financials around fast track or other capital expenditures, assets, any sort of gap related questions. Those would be, I think, an email thread that we could get it written down would be a good way to go. So terrific. All right, you see what I'm doing there? You guys see what I'm doing? All right, if there's no other questions, let's move on. All right, last 1 second, please. Okay, so on the agenda, we would take a 10-minute, we're a little bit ahead of schedule. I suggest we take our break a bit early, or unless anybody feels strongly, we can take a break now for 10 minutes, or we can push on and I'll just push the pause button in 10 minutes. Anybody care one way or the other? Okay, let's take our 10 minutes. Let's take our 10-minute break now. So we will see you guys back online in 10 minutes. All right. Let's get this party started again. Okay, so we are going to pick this conversation, excuse me, we are going to pick this conversation up at section 5. We're going to crank through, or we're going to work through the board action agenda. So we have a few items here this month, starting with our director election timeline proposal, something that is all near and dear to everybody's heart. And Jessica, are you going to drive this conversation?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We added a memo that we requested the board to read prior to the meeting and the timeline. So that's it.
That's
If
it.
there's any questions.
I would just add one more thing, that the timeline proposed is not just based on all of our bylaws and state laws that we have to follow. There's quite a number of steps, but it's also based on the preference of the Plata County Clerk, who has requested that we have our elections this year in May. And so that's what the timeline's based on.
Okay. Yeah, so not a lot of wiggle room here. Sort of is what it is, but if there's a couple items worth chatting about, Tim, go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate there's lots of moving parts to this. And so lining all this stuff up is probably a big effort. And however, having just gone through the election this year and getting feedback from a lot of people I talked to, members and so forth, I feel that there was that actually turned out to be a really good timing to have it in June rather than May. So I'm just giving that feedback, which I got on more than one occasion, that there was, I think, heightened awareness and participation. Maybe the numbers don't show it, I'm not sure, but anyway, I provide that feedback for what it's worth.
Terrific, thank you. So Hillary, thanks for preparing this. I also agree there's a ton of moving parts in there and we don't have a lot of wiggle room on this. Do you need a vote here, or are you just telling us that this is sort of where it's at?
So we do need the resolution to be passed. So basically the election schedule, it needs to be tied appropriately to the board meeting schedule, because it should be that the board member is seated and has their first board meeting shortly after the conclusion of the election. And also the annual meeting date is set in there. We don't need to decide on the format of the annual meeting, but the passing of the resolution that's in the board packet will be a tacit approval of the election schedule. That makes sense.
We need to, so you're saying we just need to pass B, the next item. We don't need to have any action on line item A.
No.
Okay, okay, because that's what I think.
That was your question, right?
That was my core question was, do we need something that's, because we have a resolution that we're about to discuss related to the meeting dates. Is there something else you need done?
No, no action on item A, just on item B.
Okay, terrific. Yep. Okay, so item B is our meeting dates. It is not possible to accommodate everybody's schedule, so we will for sure. I'm sorry, did you have something on A, Tim, before we pushed on?
Yeah, I'm just noticing that the agenda calls for a resolution 2021-12 for the director meeting dates, but the resolution in my packet says 2021-14. So I'm not sure, we should just verify what one we might vote on, if that's the correct number.
Graham?
14 is the correct number. And it's at page 73 of the director point packet.
All right, because again, on the agenda, it said that was partial requirements.
Right, and actually we sent out an updated email to the full board with the corrected agenda and the corrected resolution number. So we just, if folks can make sure you go back to your emails, that's the only way we know how to communicate with everybody on updates. But we should have mentioned that at the beginning, Tim. So thanks for clarifying that.
My bad, I didn't didn't pull up the latest email. Sorry about that.
Well, but we should have mentioned that before we started the discussion. So thanks for clarifying.
Okay.
I'll make a motion then to approve resolution 2021-14, 2022, a lot of 20s in there, LPA Board of Directors meeting dates.
Terrific, thank you. Excellent. So open the floor for discussion. So we have a first and a second. Opening floor for discussion. Kohler, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I'm a little confused what Hillary and Jessica were telling us. So this resolution, because I don't actually see the wording in there as far as the annual meeting, I think you mentioned, and also the election schedule. I'm confused. Are you saying this is part of this resolution?
That's correct. So the resolution is what we need for meeting dates, which includes the annual meeting. The annual meeting, Graham's looking at me and saying no. I'll let Graham answer.
So if you go back to page number 72, right, we have scheduled for the October board meeting that the board pass its resolution to use the county clerk as its independent third-party administrator of the election, and also that the board fix the election date so that we can notice it. So, you know, to be completely transparent here, we built in an extra month of safe time in case something happened at this meeting that allowed this to not get passed, right? We didn't want to just presume that merely because we presented a resolution to the board that you were going to automatically rubber stamp it and pass it for us. So we built in an extra month in case we needed to get sent back to the drawing board on these dates or something like that. So we
then
actually,
the resolution we're looking at passing today does not deal with the annual meeting and the election schedule. That'll be a new resolution next month, correct?
next month, we will have a resolution with the specific annual meeting date and with the retention of the county, La Plata County Clerk as the election administrator. We'll have both of those. They will, but part of that is that, like Hillary was saying, we kind of need to know when the board meetings are so that we can schedule the election for like the week before the board meeting, so that we don't end up in the situation we had this year where, you know, new directors, we have directors off the board and we have this sort of, you know, 3-4 week gap where, you know, in the case of 2021, you know, our president didn't stand for re-election. And so we had a sort of an interesting board governance gap there that we'd like to not have this year or in next year.
That clears the confusion for me. Thank you.
So again, just to summarize this, so I understand it correctly, you presented the proposed election timeline on page 72 for our information, because that provided context for establishing the 12 dates in December, or excuse me, in 2022. And then next month, we're going to use these election dates that were, meeting dates that we're going to pass right now to finalize the schedule on page 72.
Correct.
Terrific. Okay. So as we said before, we had a first and a second. We are in discussion right now. Other items related to the open motion. Okay. Well, all in favor of passing the resolution 2021-14, hold your hand up and say aye.
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 Okay. All opposed? Any abstain? Okay, the resolution passes. Thank you for that. Okay, pushing on. We are going to do Committee on Policies update. And that goes to, I believe, Ted Compton.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks, John. Yeah, so this will be a little bit shorter than it looks on the packet. Hopefully everybody got an email from me describing the recent Committee on Policies meeting and sort of what we accomplished and what our goal is to accomplish over the next both short and medium term time frame, and how we're kind of starting off with the 400 series policies. That email really kicked off that process. And I have received some commentary and feedback from a few board members so far. So thank you very much for that. Please continue that. Board members who have already supplied feedback, what you can expect is either that your feedback has been well considered and will be as best possible incorporated, or you can expect contact from myself or someone else on the Committee on Policies if we think that it's not in line with what we expected, or we think it's challenging to include properly. You will get some discussion on that. So the goal being that really almost all of the work is done offline. We really want to respect everyone's time in sort of upcoming board meetings, and utilize the time we have offline. Myself and the rest of the Committee on Policies is committed to spending the time that it takes to make this happen in a very quick manner. And so we've put in the board packet, essentially the same thing that came out in the email, what essentially the proposal is for handling the 400 series policies. The intent being that in the October meeting, the Committee on Policies will come forward with a resolution to accept what will be placed in the board packet prior to that meeting. So, the Committee on Policies, I believe we said we would take comment through September 24th, and then we'll spend as a committee a little bit of time trying to work back and forth with the commenters, and then also incorporate those comments properly into the existing policies, draft that all up, present it to the board, and really our hope is really to have a yes/no vote on that in the October meeting. So please don't come to the October meeting expecting to wordsmith, expecting to get your last little bit in. If you make suggestions and you have communication with this committee that sort of indicates that it's not going to go in a way that you feel is acceptable or appropriate, your action really is to vote against that resolution, that I do not want to accept the changes in policy that are presented by the committee. I'll let Graham speak briefly to this as well. I mean, I do think there are somewhat similar to what we do with the consent agenda. There's the potential of saying, I'm good with everything here except one thing. Let's just throw it out so that we can pass the resolution, less one policy or less one part that we're not in agreement with. But my point really here is that we need to get this work done in the next few weeks. It's a really short section. The resolution, at least to the committee's thought process, is pretty straightforward here. So if we can't slam dunk this one with the procedure that we're trying to define, we're faced with a huge challenge coming up with getting through the rest of the policies. And we really do think that it's important that we do this full revision, and that we get this to a point that that like Graham said in his earlier memo, that we don't have the conflicts, that we don't have the lack of connectivity between the policies. We have a large policy library. It's really not understandable by really membership or the board. I mean, really, Graham's really the only person that has spent enough time to be able to properly implement our policy system. So we need to get it back to a point where it's really usable by us and by staff. And so, I'm just really requesting your participation, and hopefully we'll enjoy the process. I mean, I think nobody loves, working through and rewriting policies, but I think if we do it the right way, it won't turn into an arduous process, and we can get a lot accomplished in a small amount of time. So I don't intend to dig into, and I'll probably say this again, I don't intend to dig into the nitty-gritty of this thing today. But if there are, questions about what our expectations are, this would be the time to do it. I'll give Graham the floor for just a second to maybe discuss if he thinks I've missed anything in the process about what our expectations are for the October board meeting, and what options we might have to sort of a yes no vote. Thanks. Go ahead, Graham.
Yeah, I think you covered it all really well, Ted. I think, as we went through at our June meeting with policies, if we really get to the point where we think, we want to table one individual item, we can do that. But generally, the idea is to get to an up-down vote in October. Other than that, I think you really summed it up well. If anybody's got any specific questions for me, I'm happy to answer them though. Kohler, is that for me or for Ted?
I'm not too sure who it's for, because I'm a little bit confused on exactly how we're going to go forward. But I do have on page 75 of 97, that policy 402. And I think this is what you're calling the memo, but it states in there that this is not a role for the board, and it may be relocated in management directives. I've always felt that this was part of the role for the board. And I know that Sue has mentioned in the past, and the board she was on, that they did have fraud with the, I can't remember if it was the CEO or who it was. I'm just nervous not having some oversight of at least the CEO or the senior staff. But maybe I'm off track. So
well, no,
maybe
Kohler,
if you could comment on that, if this is the time. Again, I don't know if this is the time by what you were just saying or not.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not the time, but it is a good time to. That's a great question, and I think it points to. Hopefully, I can describe the process that we want to go through, so that we don't, so that we do take advantage of that perspective on this policy. And so, Kohler, the expectation would be that you write that in a short email or redline this section if you have specific wording. I mean, ideally, it's a simple statement. I think this should be reviewed by the board in such a way, right? I think this is relevant for this reason. Don't throw it out because this is my opinion on it. And then we can go back and forth. We can take your opinion to the policy committee, or we can come right back to you and have an individual discussion to get more clarity, to get that history that you're presenting, maybe from other board experience or other boards, why it maybe it should or shouldn't be in there. And so the whole goal there being that we can still get that comment, but it doesn't have to be tackled in essentially a 12-person board plus staff meeting. And then hopefully by the time we take all that input in and we redraft this, we've gotten to the point where we are addressing all the critical issues, to the point where, in your specific case, 402, or however we modify 402, if we move it into the 100 series somewhere, or if we move it into something like a management directive, that you're satisfied with how it addresses the board's requirement to execute our fiduciary duty. So does that make sense? I mean, certainly we're not digging into the answer to your question, but my hope is that the process makes sense and that you feel like there's a way to get that input in.
So I think that we'll have to go through the process a few times to get comfortable with it. I also would really, really stress that any questions asked or replies via email is shared with everybody, so we aren't, going down separate paths, please.
That's a great recommendation. I'll make sure that happens.
And Kohler, we're also trying to share these in an open source document where we can all follow each other's red lines. So that was sort of the hope that, even if you're just changing an and to an or something simple like that, that we can all sort of track each other's red lines.
And so let me comment on that briefly, because I think it's a great methodology, Graham. So I shared essentially this memo in a Google Doc on the Google Drive. I hope the links work on my email. And really one of the simplest ways to let everybody know what's going on is just add a comment on that Google Doc. If you don't want to redline, if you don't want to mark out specific wording. And I think, wordsmithing this, marking out specific words and changing the terminology is actually taking too much of your time the people who are not on this committee. It's really our, what we've committed to doing that kind of nitty gritty work of the wordsmithing. If you just have a comment and it says, I disagree with this not being board oversight, and then obviously your name gets attached to it because you made the comment. That's a great way to do it, Kohler and anybody else, because it does keep track. It does keep it live for everyone. But at the same time, I have a job to do on this committee. And if I have to take a few people's email comments and add them to the Google Doc to make sure they're clear, I'm happy to do that. So I don't want to prohibit anybody from making a comment because they don't like the technical way that it's getting done. So, I mean, heck, even a phone call is good enough. I mean, I want to make sure we all get input into this. And to your point, Kohler, that everybody gets to see what input everybody had. Sorry, I may have this out of order, but I see Tim's hand.
Thanks, Ted. First, thanks to the committee and to the people working on this. It's a monumental and often thankless task, I think. So I'm very appreciative of your wanting and willingness to dive into that. I think you have to be a new director to want to do this, Ted. So I'm just joking. But I'm curious about, there was in the memo, it talks about consistency. So I was just curious how you envisage consistency throughout this. Is it just like the right policies and the right 100 series or whatever, or is there something about the format or anything? Do you have any thoughts on that, please?
Go ahead, Graham.
So Ted, Tim, there's a few different kinds of consistency that I've really been combing for, right? Some of them is pretty non-substantial, like the policies haven't been reviewed to make sure they track delegations to staff according to our reorganization chart. So there's like references to the CFO when we currently have a vice president of finance, right? So there's some things like that. There are some things like you can see in this memo that the sexual harassment policy hadn't been addressed since 2006. So even though it might not be inconsistent, it's out of date. I sort of lump that in there with inconsistency. Another inconsistency is just sort of interconnectivity, right? We have a few policies that relate to each other but don't explicitly reference each other. So we have like our unclaimed capital credits and our scholarships and things like that. They relate to each other, but they don't reference each other. So I'd like to put a reference in there so that we know that if we amend one, it's going to have an impact on the other. But then the ultimate inconsistency, right, is what shows up in this memo, the idea of certain things that have been delegated to staff under policy 103 that are then sort of specifically called out in this section, in this 400 series. So those are sort of the four main areas of inconsistency that I'm looking to evaluate all of our policies together to try and get them so they're more cohesive.
So, and those four, would you summarize those real quick? The four
So names, right? Making sure that the names are all similar, making sure that everything's up to date, making sure that everything cross-references each other as it should, and then making sure that there's not internal inconsistencies, right? Like that the 100 series policy is inconsistent with the 400 series policy, or et cetera.
Hey, thank you very much. That was really helpful for me.
Kirsten, go ahead, please.
Yeah, love the idea of the process and love that most of the work gets done beforehand. What I'm concerned about, especially with emails and any emails, is the transparency to our members. So what is the method that the discussion, because transparency is also about where did this board member stand on this and stuff. So it's not just the vote. It's not just the final thing. It's it's the sausage grinding too. So where does that get seen by our members?
So I think the anticipation is that we will have, the specific, final red line version of the policy to be voted on that will be presented at the meeting. So it will say, here are the red line changes to policy 103 or whatever, and that will be presented at the board meeting and will be voted on at the board meeting.
But there's going to be perhaps 20 iterations before that final red line. There's going to be so-and-so did a little bit and so-and-so did a little bit else. We did this for the broadband committee. We said, okay, let's tweak the wording on this so that we know. And at that point we said, and we'll make a summary of those emails available. And I'm thinking, I never did that. I never made that summary of those emails available. So there was work done by this board that was not public and was not transparent.
So one thing that this will be an open to the public session. So in the policy committee, we will go through all the board's comments and show them on the Zoom. So to your point, at least this is how I was thinking of it, is that, and I think this was consistent with Ted, is that we're going to get your comments in the Google Doc, and then that we will go to the policy committee in the public session, which we post, and we will put all those documents on Zoom, and the public that wants to attend will be able to see all the red lines and listen to the discussion about how we're going to resolve the comments and come up with the final language. That's always how we've been doing it. I can't promise you that the public is going to be there, but at least we provide that opportunity for inclusion and accountability.
Good enough for me. Thank you.
Great, thanks.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, and appreciate the question, Kirsten, and the focus, on really making sure that as we go into, try and do new processes, that we're doing them right, that we aren't circumventing something that we've promised to do. So thanks for that. Joe, question, please.
Yeah, just real quick, being a member of the committee, these are not hair on fire sort of, resolutions that we have to put out there. So if, people are really, concerned about something, I think you need to speak up pretty loudly and say, I really need to talk about this, in some kind of meeting. I don't want to preclude that. And I think we have another meeting October 4th, I think, the policy committee, and maybe we can discuss this a little bit more too. I think that would be helpful, but I certainly hear some of the discomfort about, wow, are we going to talk about this? So, I agree with Ted. I voted for, the proposal. But again, it's just not us three deciding everything. So thanks.
Okay, thanks a lot, Joe. And I agree, as a committee, this is exactly the feedback we want. We want to focus on the major concerns that this board might have. We don't want to focus on nitpicking and nitty gritty. We want to make sure that if there's big problems that we're faced with, that we all have input. So input, Rachel, go next, please.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of, tell me where this lies in the process, because I realize red lines and wordsmithing, that offline, great, Google Doc, edit. But one of my questions is more, okay, I was looking at policy 414 on safety, and there was a whole line item that got left off about the CEO will start a safety program. And in your memo, it noted, there's a bunch of internal policy docs, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so my question is, do those cover that bullet point, and thus that's why it's left off? And again, maybe you don't want to talk about right now, but where does that type of dialogue, where it's kind of nuanced and gonna be tricky to communicate over email and perhaps less efficient, where does that go?
Well, I think, it's a great question, because we have to address those questions and concerns. But I think, as simple as possible, Rachel, I don't like this unless we have unless we deal with this bullet point or this line item, right? So then that's the important input that we receive as the committee. Our goal is then to address that issue. And most likely, if it's a complex issue or if it requires explanation about, it's going to disappear from 400, but it's going to reappear in somewhere in 103 or 104. To have that as a dialogue and say, hey, Rachel, this is what we as a committee expect to propose. Does that work for you? And if it still doesn't, then we haven't quite finished wordsmithing. If it does, that's great, and we can expect that resolution to pass. Does that make sense?
It does. I think mine was more an information seeking question. Like, in order to give feedback, I need to understand X, Y, and Z and why it happened.
Ask those questions all the time. I think, that I'm going to, I say that a bit flippantly because I'm going to toss all those over to Graham. If you have a question about how is this addressed currently, then, number one, read them. But if it doesn't make sense, or if you don't think it's there, then we'll get Graham to dig in and give, essentially an interpretation of what's going on there. So if it's about what exists now, honestly, you can probably just take that up directly with Graham if that's the question.
Yeah, if I just sort of chime in here, right? We've got our open source document you can comment on. You can email Ted or me or the entire committee or the entire board, whichever you feel is appropriate forum for that committee. You can come to we're going to have a quick policy committee meeting next month where we analyze what's been submitted by the non-committee directors. We will facilitate your participation. We'll meet you where you are.
And again, just please respect that this is a new process. And if it's horrible, if it blows up, then we won't pass the resolution, and the committee will consider that, a failure on our first pass, and we'll revisit the protocol. But don't kill the protocol before we give it a try. Let's really try and see if we can't make this work. Because like I said, honestly, there's no way we get through this whole process if we have to discuss the red lines on each policy that really does require change. We'll be 3 or 4 years getting through it. Whereas I think we can probably do this in 18 months probably. I mean, we're doing the easy part right now. So it'll get harder, and hopefully by then we trust the process a little bit. Any other questions? Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and say we're done with this agenda item.
Terrific. Okay. Bob, you're up.
All right. The Finance and Audit Committee met on September 9th, 9 to 11 a.m. A quick point on the schedule is that we have not laid out the permanent dates for the rest of the Finance and Audit Committee schedule for the rest of the year, or at least for the next 9 months. But Jessica and I will do that shortly, so that in advance. But typically that Tuesday or the Thursday before 2 weeks before the board meeting is the best, and sometimes it doesn't work because of other conflicts, but we'll get that nailed pretty quick. Financial review didn't really happen because our meeting happened so early in the month that the tri-state bill wasn't in, and you've all seen those financials now. We're very pleased with how that's all playing out this year. We know we have really high margins. That's not such a bad thing. We'll see where the budgeting process takes us next year. And as we said, a year from now, we'll revisit those financial goals, and they should help drive the budget process next year. But we're happy with where all the financials are landing. In terms of really specific things to expect, Carl gave us an update on the 2022 budget development calendar, and none of us have seen any of that output yet. The words are that that's all working well. Individual department budgets are coming together better than last year. But when we all get to see that as a board here, the 2022 income statement will be provided at the October meeting. The projected 2022 income and expense statement will be at next month's board meeting presented by Carl. We will see it in the Finance and Audit Committee in advance of that. And then the things that we all dig into a lot, capital items and capital projects budgets that are tremendous amounts of energy go into figuring those out. We will see the first review of those first at the Finance and Audit Committee in November, and then the full board will see those at the November board meeting, where we'll dig into the details of how we're spending our projected to spend and budget our capital money. So those concrete outcomes will be happening in October and November, and we'll get a chance to dig in and talk about the 2022 in the financial sense. We had a very good executive session. Most of that will get shared. I believe all of that will get shared in our executive session today, but primarily we looked at the review of the buy down payment formula that staff is proposing. They're negotiating with Tri-State on. Everything with that is going quite well. We debated whether to bring a recommended motion or resolution to the board and regarding that buy down payment formula. And we decided that really we just needed to remind ourselves that we authorized through resolution the CEO to have the authority to go forward with those negotiations and reach satisfactory resolution in those negotiations with Tri-State. We did that resolution back in August of 2019. And what we really want to say as a Finance and Audit Committee now is that we just want to put our full support behind that resolution at that time and say that staff is doing a great job, continue to go forward. You'll see the details of that buy down formula. We didn't want to bring numbers and formula elements into the public session today. You'll see those in executive session. All I can say is that's going quite well and being handled extremely well by Jessica and Dan. So we don't have a recommended motion. We have a recommendation to continue to support staff in that work. And that's the report I have today.
Outstanding. Questions or comments?
I just want to make sure I'll clarify with Jessica that we will go through the buy down formula in the executive session and where those numbers, what kind of numbers that's yielding. Is that correct?
Yeah, we can do a quick summary at the executive session on that.
Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
Okay, outstanding. Those are two very strong committee updates. So again, thank you very much. A lot of the hard work gets done down at the committee level, as it comes up to the top for these board meetings. We look for up down votes. There's the nitty gritty work gets done down at that committee work. It's totally, like Tim said, yeah. It's just hard work, and we definitely appreciate the effort that's being done in the committee, in all of the committees. So thank you again to both the Finance Committee and the Policy Committee in particular. So onward to item 5, section E. This is resolution 2115, the capital credit requirements, and that is page. 77. Page 77. Okay.
I move that we approve resolution 2021-15.
Let's get right to the party.
Second it.
There you go. Thank you. Okay, the motion's been first and seconded, so we'll open that for discussion. Questions or comments? Kohler, you had your hand up first. Go for it.
Just one quick grammatic error in the very last sentence, the very last paragraph. I, Dan Huntington. In the second line there, it should say the above is a true and correct copy. So just the A should be included in there.
You can get that changed, Kohler. Let's see what you're talking about.
Okay, thank you. While Graham's doing that, let's move on to Dan. I'm sorry, Kohler, did you have any? Okay, good. Dan, the floor is yours.
I have a question on the last whereas. So 4 million is coming from our local savings, and the G&T will, what's the dollar value on the G&T patronage capital to be refunded for the years of 96, 97, 98? Or is it a total of $4 million?
It's a total of 4 million across those 3 years, all G&T. And in one of the spreadsheets that's attached down, it shows the breakdown between the years.
No, not specifically that. So is it 4 million plus a G&T, or is it 4 million total?
It's 4 million and it's 100% G&T.
Nothing off of our local savings.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Dan. Kirsten, you're up.
Yeah, Carl, can you touch on the philosophy on that? Just retiring that? Are we trying to get that down?
We're trying to retire the oldest stuff that we have so that we are consistently at that 20 to 21 year retirement.
And the oldest stuff we have is all the tri-state stuff. We don't have any 96.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay. Dan, looks like you have a follow-on question. Go ahead, please. Nope, you're good. Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts here? Joe, go ahead.
I'd just like to point out that people who are complaining about the board not refunding capital credits back to members, I think if you look at our record over the past at least 2 years, we've been doing this pretty consistently. So this is giving back to our members. And Jessica, is that right? It all comes from Tri-State or Carl?
Yes. And Carl, just to refresh your guys' memory, if you want to, he sent a really well-documented memo on this issue as well. If you want to go back and look at that, that answers a lot of the questions being asked. But yes, Joe, I believe, Carl, that those were all the tri-state capital credits.
That's correct.
And just to reiterate, this is something new that we're trying. So maybe many of you did not catch this, but we're actually trying to attach a little bit more information for each of these resolutions so that it would hopefully answer a lot of these questions. So would just really hope that you guys take the time to look at our emails, because we're spending a lot of time trying to address questions and give a little bit more detail in advance. If that's not helpful, then we can get rid of the memos, but we just thought it would be one other data point for everybody.
I'll just say that, I read the memo. It was very explanatory. We have to remember that we do have an audience. So some of the questions help too, because we didn't really introduce and talk about what this was. So we just got to make it clear to the members what we're talking about. Thanks. And yeah, this is a great refund.
Great. Thanks, Joe. Tim, you're up.
Great, thanks. Yeah, it is a well-constructed memo and good information, but there's probably some corollary to Murphy's Law that says the more information you get, the more questions you get. So just be aware of that. And I'm curious on the table, which is really helpful on page, is it 80? It's either 78 or 80. I might be on an older 80. Version of this. There's this period from 2000 through 2003 in which there's no listed capital credits, and I'm curious Is that because they, it was an era where there were no capital credits allocated by the GNT and LPEA? Or is that because those have been retired somehow?
So that table, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right thing. So the table which has the gap between 2000 to 2003, this table is purely the GNT stuff. And yeah, we were not allocated anything by Tri-State in those years because they recorded a loss.
All right. Okay. So it's GNT only, and they didn't allocate us anything in those years.
Correct.
Excellent. Thank you, Carl.
Great. Thanks, Tim. Sue, you're up.
All right, thank you. I just want to really commend staff for recommending we do the first in, first out, the FIFO on this particular capital credits. When we did the last one, it was last in, first out. And I had a lot of members complain that we weren't giving back to the members who had been here and financed us for the last 20 years. So I'm glad to see this particular recommendation from the staff. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Sue. Rachel, go ahead.
Yeah, this is just a life hack. I'm figuring out why I'm not getting some of these memos because I was looking back to try to find them and wondering in reviewing my emails. And perhaps you all know this, but in the event you don't and are as ignorant as I am, the Outlook sorts our emails into something called focused and other. And I honestly didn't even see other because it doesn't pop up very easily. And then when I did, it all looked to be junk. And other is actually where all of these emails seem to be going. So life hack, read focused and then search for this thing called other, because that might be where some of these things are going.
And you can tell it not to move it to other.
Right. And this is like more of an actual procedural thing. So I haven't had a tech reboot or training in forever. And I know some of the software's changed just because I haven't, I'm not a new director. So maybe that's just something we plug in and remember to do. Because it's interesting in listening to some of these things. I wonder how many of them are coming down to some tech challenges, like even trying to edit docs and stuff. So not here, obviously, but just thought.
Agreed. And I think, maybe Drew or one of the other staff, at your discretion, Jessica, might be time well spent to at least make, again, a lunch and learn available for a tech refresh. And help make sure everybody's configured properly. And if they're not, let's just get them squared away. But as you think makes sense. So. Okay, we have an open, Ted, go ahead.
Thanks. I'm going to make a statement that might sound a little bit hypocritical because I'm using up time right now to talk about not using up too much time. And I guess there's been a little bit of discussion here about, okay, so we have the resolution, we have the explanation of the resolution. In theory, we're all getting the documentation. Totally respect Rachel's comment on a lot of different ways to get the information and dig for and utilize the information. But there was also a comment that, sometimes we're asking questions for the benefit of the member. And I just think there is probably a better way to make sure that we're transparent. If you have an actual question about something that's coming up in the board packet, I would just say that, when I've had those questions and presented them to staff through Jessica, I get clear and quick answers. And so then I don't actually have that question that I need to pose to this whole group for the benefit of the membership. If you feel like there's something that really should be transparent and should be clarified to the membership, maybe we need to add to the memo. Maybe there needs to be an addition to the board packet or to something that's publicly available. But I think that it's a big rabbit hole when we decide that we're having discussion or bringing up questions, not for the benefit of the board to make decisions, but so that we can keep the public informed. There really should be another better, more efficient way to do that. So Again, that's totally just my opinion, but it's something that I've picked up in the very brief period that I've been trying to get up to speed on the board, is that if I ask the questions ahead of time, I get a lot better answer via email or via phone call than I can probably get in the active board meeting. Thanks for listening.
Okay, thanks, Ted. Kristen, you're up.
Oh, yeah, great. We should ask our questions beforehand, but if they inform our decision on this stuff, it needs to be as public to folks as possible. Adding to the memorandum, which nobody outside of this board is going to see, isn't the place for it. So yeah, there might be a place for it. That place does not exist yet, and until it does exist, if we need to highlight things, and we can do that in the form of a question, or we can say, I want to point out that this is whatever. I think that's very important, and I don't care how bloody long it takes. Thank you.
Just to clarify a point, in that we are posting many of these documents to the public portal, so they are going to see some of these things. So it is going to be public.
I don't know how to determine what you're going to post and what you are not. If there's a way that it's going to be, so for instance, we're looking at 2 pages of tables, which are very informative tables, and are those going to be published or not? And if maybe it's just in the footer that says also seen on wherever it's seen. But I think I'm getting a little concerned that we are, in the interest of time or what, just we're closing in a bit, and I do not want to close in, and I will continue harping on this. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Joe, you're up.
Yeah, with all due respect, Ted, and I'm with you on the policy committee wordsmithing and something like this, we don't have a bunch of engineers on this board. We're all pretty different. And everyone, if someone has to say something, I like to hear sometimes on ideas like this, the things that I didn't even hear, don't even think about, that, come through from other board members. And that's kind of why I'm on the board. I always ask Jessica and Carl questions and they get back to me for basic stuff. But when there's matters of philosophy and why are we doing this, and, are we excluding the members? Those are really important discussions to have in open session. Thanks.
Fair enough. Thank you for the opinion. Tim, you're up.
Yeah, I think there's a motion on the floor that's been seconded, so I'd like to call the vote.
Excellent. Thank you, Tim. Let's go ahead and call the vote for.
Well, we now have to have a second on calling the vote, and then if there's a 2/3 majority to call the vote, then we proceed to the vote. If there's not a 2/3 majority, then we can continue to.
Second, Joe.
Okay. So a vote to call a vote. Do I have that right?
Yes. So
Okay.
now immediately to voting.
Yep. All in favor of going immediately to voting, hold your hand up and say aye.
Aye.
Okay. All opposed, say
Aye.
1. All abstained. Okay. The proposal, stop me if I'm doing this wrong, Graham, the proposal to go immediately to vote passes. So we will now go immediately to vote for the motion on the floor. All in favor of the motion, put your hand up and say aye.
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 All opposed? No. All abstained? Great, thank you. The motion passes. Okay. Last item for the board action agenda, the committee of the whole partial requirements. I'm sorry, did we pull this from the agenda?
Well, we certainly pulled the resolution from the agenda and believe that everyone had some level of participation in the committee of the whole, which was largely in an executive session. I don't know that there's much to discuss at this point.
Okay. Joe, did you have your hand up for this?
Yeah, at the end of that meeting, we basically said that, you would give a 4-paragraph description adhering to Ted's request, just a nice, brief, quick discussion about where we are with this. I don't know if that's anyone else's recollection. That was mine.
That I would do a 4-paragraph or Graham would do a 4-paragraph? It feels like I remember it being Graham. Just to be clear on the point, we really, I mean, I think for those of you that, I believe everybody on this, all the board members were on the committee of the whole call. We really can't give details at this stage. We're close to being able to give details. It's still premature. So I think just as a simple matter, there's actually nothing that we can report on other than what has already been reported on by Jessica earlier, that the process is continues to proceed, and we're excited to see the outcome. But that is again, speaking as an individual board member, that is my recollection of how that conversation ended. So please correct me if anybody else is remembering it differently.
I think that's right. And then the point that we will be going to the public in town hall sessions at the end of October to go into more detail with the proposal. And that's because we are in current settlement negotiations that can't be disclosed, or it would impact our ability to settle and get the best numbers for our membership possible. So that's why we can't divulge details at this board meeting.
Okay. Thank you. But that said, there's still room here. Kirsten, you're up.
Yeah, Bob did a really good job in his FAQ report talking about we discussed the resolution, but we decided to instead to just re-emphasize that we've given the CEO the authority to move forward, and to highlight that, yeah, we're moving forward on the whole thing, on all three things. So I think Bob pretty much covered what you were concerned about, Joe, was, are we going to say anything about this? And we heard that in the FAQ summary there. Thank you.
Yeah, you are correct. I'm sorry that it was Bob who did the summary on that, not Jessica. But yeah, I think we're all in alignment on that item. So let's give it a moment here for anybody else who wants to weigh in. Okay. Jessica, Graham, do we have the same timing issue with our outside attorney that we had last time, where they're not going to be available?
It will be on at 1 o'clock.
Okay, so
we can move to reports, John, if you want to.
Yeah, that's what.
Yeah, that was. Or the only other thing I had a notation was, right, so the next item would be lunch break, and you had to do director travel and training requests after lunch break. So that's where it is chronologically. But I don't know if you want to wait until after the actual lunch break to bring it back up at that point, since it is an adjusted agenda.
Yeah, so I think I'm comfortable pushing on for another 20 or where are we? Hour and 20 minutes? No, we're way ahead, aren't we? How much further do you guys want to go? How much further do you guys want to go? You want to do another 30 minutes, or you want to break now?
I wasn't suggesting we take lunch. I just sort of, like, when I had line itemed that, I had line itemed it for lunch, but lunch came an awful lot earlier. I didn't know if you wanted to give the committee, the board members, an opportunity to use their lunch break to review those documents that we pulled out of the consent agenda, or if you wanted to address them now.
I'd like to keep going and then take a break in a bit, unless anybody else feels strongly. So let's just push through for the remainder. We'll take our break. We'll do our break. Excuse me. We'll keep pushing forward. We'll take our break at its regularly scheduled time. We'll do our attorney update at its regular scheduled time. And we'll do the travel expenses right after lunch break, because nobody will have had a chance to read and internalize what that's all about without at least a few minutes to review everything without somebody talking in it. Okay. So that means, looking at the agenda, we are going to fast forward past. We're going to skip over item 6, Roman numeral 6, Roman numeral 7, Roman numeral 8, and we're just going to start picking down Roman numeral 9 until it's time to back up to the earlier action. So if anybody wants to help keep me on time, or if they're really, whatever, getting fried and need the break, then speak up or text me. So let's start with item number 9A. This is going to be the attorney report. You're back on stage, Graham.
Thank you. So if you go to page 81 of the board packet on Director Point, you can see my submitted attorney report. Also did answers to Director legal questions. It was pretty quick turnaround from last month's meeting, which was pretty late in the month, to this month's meeting, which was pretty early in the month. I tried to kind of focus on those fast track board related questions that came up at the last board meeting, but it's a fairly brief update this month. If anybody has any questions, I'll just go ahead and open it to questions. Bowler?
Cool.
Yes, on page 81 and 97, you have down there, one of the bullets is the continued work on the Pagosa broadband project. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you could just quickly brief me on, what the Pagosa broadband project is? I can't remember it.
So we've been approached by this city, or the town of Pagosa Springs, and Pagosa Area Water and Sanitation about being able to use some of our dark fiber that runs along our transmission lines in exchange for us being able to use some of their dark fiber in a different location that will effectively create a redundant loop around the city of Pagosa Springs. And I'm sure Kirsten can really sort of give you a lot more of the detail on this, but that's sort of the idea, is it's an early stage of one of these partnerships that we've been sort of talking about coming out of the broadband committee, of different entities bringing different assets to the table, in this instance to try and create a closed loop for the town of Pagosa Springs, but also for us to have a closed loop for our internal monitoring communications.
So is this the same project that we were addressing a few years ago? I think it kind of sounds familiar. We were trying to do a loop in Pagosa. Is that the same thing?
Kirsten looks like she's got better details about it. I can't speak to what happened a few years ago, but maybe Kirsten can.
Well, Dan was also unmuted, so let me give a shot if I may. So a few years ago, the issue was that we had nothing going to the LPEA headquarters in Pagosa. And working that through with, at the time, who was that, U.S. Communications was a real pain, and that was problematic. We now do have that connection. We do want to loop that connection, though, and get a full circuit. And what the Archuleta broadband, broadband committee, whatever, is trying to do, is try to build that through a bunch of partnerships. This swap is one of those partnerships. So this is new, same intent in that trying to close the loop, but it's a new working on how to do that. And we will, as more folks approach us, we will probably be hearing more about that.
Thank you.
All right, Tim.
Yeah, two things. One little clarification there, Kohler, on Pagosa, is that there is no broadband connection into Pagosa that we have been able to access other than through CenturyLink, right? So this direction is about creating a loop within the Pagosa area for that will help the municipality as well as some of the other commercial providers. But the issue we faced several years ago was we didn't have a connection in and out of Pagosa, and we ended up leasing a line through CenturyLink. That's my recollection, but again, Dan may know more. I had a question on continued negotiations on capital credit account matters of a particular.
Yeah, you want to discuss that in executive session?
You could, yeah, if that's what you prefer.
Yeah, I mean, if we want to go to any detail other than that, there's a dispute and we're working on it.
Yeah, I'd like to understand the size of the dispute at some point. So.
Okay.
So
if would you mind bringing that? Would you mind? I'll try and make a note too to bring it back up in executive session. But if you wouldn't mind reminding me when we get into the executive session.
Great, thanks, Graham. That's all I have at this point. Thanks.
Sue?
Hey, mine is fairly quick, I think. On the COVID situation, are we following more the local guidelines, or do we have more than 100 employees that we need to be worrying about? Where are we at with the new manager?
Yeah, so we're definitely keeping a close eye on the Department of Labor, whatever regulations are coming out. We do have over 100 employees. We think that that's possibly going to apply to us, right? That the one thing to remember is it is mandatory vaccination or testing weekly, right? So there isn't sort of an absolute vaccinated or you're fired, but it's going to make it very, very cumbersome. But not only am I paying attention to that, but it's a very big topic on the Electric Cooperative Bar Association chat rooms that I follow. So getting a lot of good information from NRECA back in Washington, DC about this. A lot of people are seeking some really good clarification. So, but for us, we are kind of holding fire on it until we see the actual Department of Labor regulations that come out.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Any other questions? If not, I'll remember to address Tim's question in executive session, but otherwise I'd yield the floor, Mr. President.
Okay, I need to keep my finger on the unmute button. Moving on, director reports. Let's go on to, this is item 9B1, the Roundup Foundation. To Rachel, you're up.
Great. You'll see the report in the packet. The only two things to add on to that are there's a couple issues we're looking into. You'll see further reference that in your email. Number one, just making sure that the allocation of emergency relief funds between Pagosa, or excuse me, between Archuleta and La Plata counties reflects the breakdown of membership in both counties. And then the second big one is, really starting to poke into our diversity, equity, and inclusion stance, and as it relates to funding and grant making. And I think one of the things that came up there is just a question of what LPEA's kind of stance, policy, et cetera, is around that. And so I guess I'll reach out to Graham before our next meeting to get some more information on that. Other than that, any questions? Joe.
And so this would be in addition to the non-discriminatory stuff that we worked out, I don't know, a year ago or so. Okay. All right. Thanks.
Anyone else for Rachel? Tim, go ahead.
Hey, thanks. Rachel, this is Roundup, right? You're talking about here. And I'm just curious, one grant application for August, that seems really minimal. And is that, do you think, a time of year? Is that an indication of, I don't know, what do you think is it might be an indication of, or just a little blip or whatever?
Well, I will speak from just having served before on this, and I'm guessing maybe Holly and Joe might also have perspective, or anyone else who served on it. I know in the past, there were these little ups and downs as they cycle across the year and with other grant making. It's just kind of what's going on in the nonprofit land calendar and funding cycles. This was my first meeting, I want to say, so I can't say I have some grand arc other than what we've seen in the packets, which has been that there have been multiple applicants. I don't know, Ted or anybody else have insights there?
No, one thing I'll just mention is that we're going to redo our website so that Roundup applicants can go to our website and actually make it a lot easier. It's kind of a burdensome process and a lot of paper. So we're going to try to make it a lot more visible on how people can apply for the Roundup funds, and it'll all be automated, goes to the computer, easier documentation, just to help hopefully facilitate any burden, administrative burden it creates for some of these groups to get more people to apply.
So if you had no applications, I guess there would be no grants for that month. Is that correct? Interesting. All right, thanks much.
Ted.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Just a quick comment. We did have a pretty good slate of applicants, and by good I just mean quantity, and to the extent that we had to have discussion about we granted half of the application value on a couple of requests last month. So I think it's a glitch. As a personal opinion, I think it's a glitch. Maybe it's a cycle. Maybe we had a short window in this one. And so I think, hopefully it's a glitch. Hopefully we get more requests. Hopefully the things that Jessica is talking about makes that easier. I also would just put it out to board members, spread the word. It's one of, like I said, I think in the last meeting, this is a really fun piece of being part of this board, is that we do get to, recognize some of our community service aspect directly by giving this money out. So, if you can spread the word personally, that will help as well. If we don't give out money in one cycle, the pool builds up. In fact, the pool has built up over the course of COVID because submissions were, at least this is anecdotally to me, submissions were quite low through the COVID pandemic. Maybe some of that's still going on, but we did build up the reserve to quite a bit more than it has historically been. And so we're capable at this point of giving out a little bit more than what the average has been, to get back down to kind of a normal level. And if we get months where there are none, that doesn't help us get back down to the normal level. So that's just a little bit of brief history from my short tenure on that board.
Go ahead, Bob.
Yeah, since we have time, I'll just make a comment that I was on that board a few years ago, and it's probably just really worth paying attention to whether there's a new trend or some reason why we're having fewer applicants, because historically, 6 or 8 per month were in there. We put in policies back in 2015 where we were limiting that you couldn't come back for a year, that kind of thing. Because there was just a lot of how to manage the volume of requests. So maybe it's an artifact of COVID. Maybe it was just a blip for 1 month, but it's worth thinking about what's going on there. And people have always filled out all the paperwork and all that stuff. So I agree, making it easier is really good, but we haven't lacked for applicants in the past. So it's worth paying attention and seeing if that's a trend or not.
Great, thanks, Bob. Joe, you're up.
Yeah, we did have applicants during COVID, but it did seem to tail off a little bit. And, I'm just wondering if there was so much money swimming around out there that a lot of people tapped into, because I know through I think Community Foundation, a lot of their contributions were really through the roof. So I don't know. It's an interesting question though.
Yeah, so maybe what Ted and I can do, just hearing some of the curiosity here, is we can bring back at our upcoming roundup meeting, just an inquiry into trends, what we're feeling about outreach, and just see if the roundup board has some thoughts or some action that they want to take on that. So yeah, really good observations, and thanks so much for
Brigham would probably have a lot of insight on that. I don't think there's anyone on the board who's really plugged into the nonprofit world the way she was. So
awesome. Yeah, I'll give her a call. Thank you.
Great, thanks. Okay. All right, if there's no more questions, let's push on to Tri-State.
Okay, thank you. Our board meeting was last week, and it was in the middle of the week instead of the beginning of the week, and therefore the reports that I usually get to you quicker, I couldn't, because they're supplied by Tri-State. So the board highlights did make it into the director packet here. The board report, which I think is a better report, is in the drive. I didn't receive that until Friday after the deadline. And normally I don't get it till the next week. So they did get it to us quicker, but not quick enough for our deadlines. A few highlights that I'd like to mention that are not in those reports. One of them is that there's a new Colorado regulation that Tri-State has to open up its board meeting to the public. It actually takes effect in October, but we did it in September. It's kind of a practice run, and they opened it up. The press can attend. The press cannot address the board unless the chairman allows it, but they can attend. Members can attend, and they can attend not just the board meetings, but also other meetings as well. And then consumers can attend. And any of the ones that are going to attend have to register a minimum of 3 days before the meeting gets started, so that they can go through and make sure they're with the press, or that they're a member, or they are an actual consumer of one of Tri-State's members. So this month they did put the word out there. I don't know how well it got out there, because there was nobody that applied to come. And this was a hybrid meeting, so they could attend either in person or virtually. And we had nobody from the press. We did have one consumer that wanted to come, but then did not show up. So we had nobody and couldn't experience that very much. Another thing that Tri-State did, for those that are familiar with the boardroom, it's a circular boardroom. And what we're doing now going forward is that all the committee meetings will be held concurrently. So, consecutively. So anyway, they changed the seating. So all of the financial and audit committee sits together, and then the external affairs, and then also the E&O committee. And that was kind of interesting, because you've got directors on that board that have been there over 20 years in the same seat, and that has never moved. And it was kind of fun, because you can get lost in that room too. You're like, okay, where am I? Because it's circular and it looks pretty much the same. There's a couple landmarks, but it was kind of funny to see how the reactions were. The month of July was the first positive financial month this year for Tri-State. So that was a good thing. Now, just like LPEA and most of the members at Tri-State, the member sales is down, but what is up is the non-member sales. And the non-member sales is what really carried through the day and gave us a positive month for July. I mentioned that a couple months ago, one of my biggest concerns is inflation, and we're really seeing some effects of inflation at Tri-State. And one of the announcements that was made is a notice that they received from WAPA, and WAPA is putting through a 14% rate increase. That's going to hit hard. They're also cutting down the capacity that they're going to release just because they don't have it to give it. So that was, you know, that's a big announcement, 14%. At the same time, you have the 2% reduction we did in the rates. So there's some big challenges coming up. Also last month, Tim, you asked me about if you could figure out what the generation was for the other purchased power. And I dropped the ball on you. I had it in my packet when I went to the meeting and I didn't ask anybody. So I will follow up on that, but I don't have an answer for you now. So with that, I'll open it up for questions. And I would really suggest that you look at those reports from Tri-State because they're very thorough. They really cover what we did. So, John, do you want me to call on people or are you going to call on them?
Or you can call on those you wish.
Okay, I can't tell the order, but it looks like Holly, you might have been first.
Hey, thank you, Kohler, for that report. I'm a little alarmed too about that WAPA rate increase, you know, combined with the way the water levels are low. I'm sure there's going to be impact there. But I wanted to acknowledge the on the Tri-State website now at the very top, there's a banner that's like board meetings, click here. And they've made it really incredibly easy to find the link to be able to sign up to go to that board meeting and those board meetings. So I just want to say kudos and thank you for that piece of transparency on the Tri-State website.
I will pass that on. Thank you. Tim, I think you're next.
Hey, thanks, Kohler. Thanks for the report. I didn't find those other reports easily. So the link that you gave just went to the board report, not the others, but I'll find them eventually. In the board, Tri-State board report for September that you linked us to, it mentions Tri-State's rural community assistance proposal within the potential infrastructure bill, right? And it surprised me a little that they name it as their proposal because I've kind of followed this a little bit and I wasn't aware that this was Tri-State. So and maybe there's two, maybe there's more than one proposal, or this is a subset of a proposal or something. Is it possible to get a copy of that somewhere? It's touted a lot here in the report, but I don't think I've seen it. And we wrote, I think, signed on to a letter to various legislators that supported rural community assistance. I wasn't quite sure, is that the same as what Tri-State's claiming credit for here, or is this something different or a subset or whatever?
So what started this was, I can't remember exactly the time, but it was pretty much Tri-State and also the Sierra Club. And what they were trying to do is get funds for the generation units that they were, had to close down before their end of life. So they did start it, but at that time they called it the, what was it? I can't remember the name now. It just slipped in my mind. It's right there on the end of my tongue. Anyway, that's what they were calling it. And they found out that was kind of a negative title for it. And they also had a lot of friction from NRECA at the time, because NRECA did not want to chase after those funds for the abandoned assets, and that's the term I was looking for, is abandoned assets. Stranded assets. Thank you. So yeah, Tri-State was in the beginning of that, and they had quite a battle on their hands. They had the Sierra Club, but they had a lot of force against them within our ECA. Now they have changed that name, like you mentioned, and that's what's in the bills that are going forward. And they now also have the support of NRECA, because some of the other GNTs are also saying, wait a minute, we do need help with these stranded assets. So I do believe that Tri-State was one of the original ones that got this rolling, but now it has changed the name. As far as getting you more information on that, I'll have to check. I have not seen it, and I don't know if it's available or not, but I'll find out.
All right, it could be just a name change that's confusing me here. And
it probably is, because they did change it. And actually at Tri-State, if you say stranded assets, you get fined $1. So Everybody's trying to get to that new name, so that's.
I guess I owe you $2, sir. So.
Well, they did. You know, if they're watching, I'll have to pay, but otherwise, I won't have to pay either. Maybe that's why I forgot the name. I don't want to get penalized. So,
all right,
that was all for you.
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks a lot for the explanation.
Yeah. So, Bob.
Yeah, thanks, Kohler. Thanks for your report and your work. I want to comment also and ask a question about the 14% increase from WAPA. That's a big deal, I understand. I think it's, you know, it's inflationary in one sense, but is it also not caused and driven exclusively by WAPA has a lot less power to sell, so they've got to cover those base costs with much less output. So do you know what a percent reduction that Tri-State's expecting from WAPA in terms of output of power or power to buy?
I do not know that, and I don't think Tri-State knows exactly right now. If so, they didn't mention it. But as far as inflation, this is 100% driven by drought. This is not by other things. It is solely driven by drought, or however you want to call it. But I can see we'll probably know more this next week, because this just came in. I think it was just at the end of last month that they got that notice. So it's fairly recent, and the detail was not out there.
Well, it's interesting, and it's part of a big trend. And you know, I mean, sometimes inflation might kind of put a slant on it that it's caused by something else. But as you said, you know, it's 100% caused by drought. And some of the things I've read say that, you know, Lake Powell and Lake Mead, you know, Powell had to call on water from Navajo Lake and Blue Mesa Reservoir and Flaming Gorge Reservoir just to keep those turbines running this year. And they're saying the next year could be even worse. So those are some pretty monumental effects of climate change and drought. And I know they roll through and affect Tri-State, and in turn they affect us. But I guess I would like to know what percent of Tri-State's overall power supply comes from WAPA, maybe sometime down the line, but something for us all to keep an eye on. And it's a good reason why we're trying to do partial requirements and have other power suppliers, because those traditional means of getting power from hydro all over the West are probably on the significant decline in the next few years.
And I think you're correct that they do anticipate next year being actually worse than this year.
Yeah.
And they do that through their figures of, you know, what it takes to recover and everything else. Even with a normal winter, they're gonna be struggling for next year. And if we don't get a good normal winter, that level gets too much lower, then it's going to be below the intake for the generation units.
Yeah.
So
which is phenomenal.
It's a scary deal
to imagine. Yeah. So thanks for your update and report on that. Appreciate it, Kohler.
And one other thing I'll mention too, since we talked about the drought's affecting Tri-State in other ways as well. So like the Craig unit, that uses a lot of water, and that water is the same that is used by ranchers and farmers and everybody else. And it's getting low. So it's going to hit in quite a few different angles as far as generation throughout the whole West. Kirsten, I guess you're next.
Yeah, thanks, Kohler. Thanks for all the reports. Bob, there's a pie chart in one of Kohler's reports, and I don't have it in front of me, that shows the breakout of what percentage of their power comes from, and it includes WAPA there. So you can see that breakdown. The drought is definitely is causing inflationary pressure because of electricity is going to be more expensive from them. So it's not just blaming it on inflation. It's also a lot of things that trigger that inflation. And I'll touch on that when we talk about the Western United too. One thing, and I think Tim, that you mentioned this, I just wanted to highlight it, that a lot of our clean energy that comes from Tri-State comes from WAPA. So as that decreases, that means that the non-clean energy is probably going to have to pick up. So our carbon goals are going to be affected by this. Keeping that in mind.
And I think one little bit of relief in that, and that is acknowledged by Tri-State, but they're also putting on new units. They just put on a new wind unit last month or the month before. And they've got a couple other ones they've got on the books. And, but you're correct. I mean, that's a big chunk of the non-carbon generation. Tim?
Right, just to follow up on that, I think from the experience that we had in the Power Supply Committee where we met with WAPA on several occasions and so forth, the majority at that time, that's 2 years ago, so it may have changed a bit since then. The majority of the renewables that Tri-State indicates is provided to us as members came from WAPA, not from new generation, right? And if you look at it from a Colorado state standpoint, there's this discrepancy between what they can report because you, under the net metering law and so forth in Colorado, you couldn't report older, hydropower as a part of it. So there's this, it gets confusing in a hurry, but suffice to say that the majority of it was WAPA power. And the issue right now with WAPA power and that cost increase is not really inflation. It's that they have had to ratchet down the output from the two dams due to the climate change induced drought. And so WAPA still has to fulfill its power contracts to its members. So they have to go and buy this power somewhere else and then deliver it to us through Tri-State. So that as that hydropower diminishes, WAPA has to find it on the open market. And that's going to increase the cost. It's also going to decrease the surplus in those markets to some degree that have existed for a while. And it has some bearing on our discussion around partial contract and fixing prices and so forth going forward. So it's useful to understand that dynamic, I think. And I see Dan is missing from the thing, and he may have, a better or more complete understanding of that. Oh, there he is, than I did, but I think that's kind of what's going on. Yes.
I don't think I have too much more to add to that, Tim. We've, gotten different breakdowns from Tri-State on their generation profile mix, and a good portion of it comes from WAPA, but I'd have to dig into things a little deeper there to get exact percentages.
So I did look real quick here, and I got that pie chart, I think is the one that Kirsten mentioned. And what the pie chart shows is the part of WAPA's contribution to the renewable generation. But it doesn't do the overall generation. And what that shows is that WAPA LAP is 21% and WAPA CRISP is 24%. So it is a huge chunk, 45% of the renewable energy that Tri-State has. So any other questions? Otherwise, that finishes my report, Mr. Chairman.
Excellent, thank you. Okay, pushing on. Tim, oh, I'm sorry, Rachel, did you have one more question you want to add to Kohler before we move on?
Yeah, I'm just curious. I know that the new chairperson, is it Rabon or something else? Rabon stepped in, and has he kind of put forward any vision or thoughts about governance under his, I was going to use the word regime, but that's not right, under his leadership? Is there any changes that he's proposing, or kind of stay the course?
Well, like I said, the biggest change was that seat change, and that was huge for that crowd. But no, I think it's a little too early yet, and I think he has to get his feet on the ground first. It was pretty interesting because I've watched him as he chairs other committees and stuff, and he's a very strong chair. But he was extremely nervous at this board meeting, being the first one. And it was something I didn't expect. But I haven't sat in that seat, so I sure can't knock him for it. But I think we'll see it coming up real quick as he gets his feet wet and brings it forward. I'm actually very encouraged. I think the the change is a good change, and there's good opportunity.
So did they pull out one of those seats and all that seat change so that there was one short seat? And
You know, when the music stopped, exactly.
maybe it could be LPA.
Okay. All right. So let's push on here. Tim, you are up for fast track. Kohler, thank you for that. Tim, you are up for fast track.
I think you saw the report. A couple of notes. One is and Carl alluded to this earlier as well, and it's in the report. But the last couple of months, the financials have not been able to be completed. There was an accounting person that handled this at Fast Track that resigned somewhat suddenly, and Fast Track came to LPEA and asked for help, and LPEA has been helping a lot. But that happened also at a time when some of the finance staff were scheduled for vacation. So there's a little catch up. It's not really a crucial issue as far as I can tell. And I believe Fast Track staff are really grateful for LPEA's support in helping. And they put together an agreement and so forth very quickly, very responsibly. So I also want to give my thanks to Carl and Jessica and the finance staff, including Monica, who's doing a great job there. Those should resume, and if shortly, and if I get them before the next board meeting, I'll let people know. And if anyone wants a copy, they're welcome to have them. The ability to hire an engineering replacement for the Natumbu who left a couple of months ago has been challenging as well. There's a lot of discussion about difficulty in finding workers throughout sort of service industry, but it seems it's affecting a lot of other industries as well. And that level of expertise is often something you have to find outside of our local economy. And there are indications that the difficulty in finding housing, even for someone who's well compensated, as somebody in that position would be, is a factor in our economy today as well. So it's not just somebody collecting unemployment, it's where do they live? What's it cost them to do so? And maybe that's where some of those ARPA funds are being considered to be directed in our community rather than at broadband, which is not really what I personally would like to see, but I understand that is a critical issue for us. Right? We also looked at and discussed, based upon the broadband committee's or the resolution that was adopted by the board, recommended by the broadband committee, what that might look like in terms of Fast Track's own broadband strategic goals going forward. And I think it buttresses kind of what we said last month, which is that Ted and I said that there is an element of our LPEA taking and adopting a strategic goal, which is helpful to Fast Track to understand sort of the ground that they can stand on. And that's was reflected in that discussion. I can't say there was a great deal that was different in terms of decisions, but it will help in sort of directing effort in the next year. And then finally, there's one small sort of opportunity that came up for Fast Track to dip its toe into fiber to the home. And I mentioned that in the report, a small subdivision in which the residents of that subdivision were willing to pay to have some of the infrastructure to deliver it to their homes. And they are highly appreciative of that. There may be other elements in other subdivisions like that in the community where they would, the residents would be willing to pony up for some infrastructure in order to get fiber optic, high-speed, reliable broadband into their communities. And this will give a fast track some indication of that and some experience on that. But I think it's a larger question also for LPEA. There's grant funding, but there is also funding where people who want this type of infrastructure will work together to contribute towards that kind of broadband delivery. Anything else? I think maybe one last thing is that the sort of resources, human resources changes that Fast Track are, you know, they're demanding a lot of Kelly, who's the general manager, a lot of her time and energy. So to the extent that she's been getting support from LPEA and having conversations with Jessica, I think that's highly beneficial for both organizations. And it's kind of making her focus a little more on what assistance she might need and what she can get rather than having to do it all within house. So to me, it's difficult. I don't envy her position, but I do think it's got some potential long-term benefits. So any questions anyone has? Joe, you've got a question?
Yeah, I guess just maybe, yeah, question for Carl and Jessica. Is there any advantage, since we own, 75% of Fast Track, is there any advantage to us holding on to, the accounting function stuff and providing more, I don't know, personnel help, whatever we can do?
I think we'd love to, but our staff are at max capacity. So we let Kelly know that we really need her to find a replacement by November, because like I said, we're not able to do all the work that we have to do and keep up on Fast Track's financials. So we would have to add another person.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Who's there?
Question.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you. When I was on Empire's board, then we would get a monthly financial report that was given to the board during executive session. Would that be possible for us to do here as well? To me, even more so than on Empire, because they only owned a quarter where we have 3 quarters. It would be nice to see what their financial positions are. So just
that's typically provided in my report every month.
Okay, I hadn't.
You get the financials as part of the report. It hasn't been the last 2 months because of this accounting person not being.
Okay, I noticed it hadn't been there for the last couple of months, and not having that financial person makes sense. So thank you.
Sure. Anyone else? I don't see any other hands up, so I think. All right, thanks very much. Back to you, John.
Great, thanks, Tim. Okay, pushing on, we're on to CREA. Holly, you back?
Yep.
Good. Glad to have you.
Well, thank you.
The floor is yours.
Great, I appreciate it. So CREA, we did have a budget and finance committee meeting right out of the gate, August 23rd. They're facing 6% increases in their health insurance benefit packages. The strategy session, which was on the 26th, it was interesting. It started out with a recap of kind of the last legislative session. The primary topics that were addressed, according to CREA, was transportation, which is now #1 in emissions, both in Colorado and the country, electric generation, oil and gas, and building heating. So of note, SB 230, which capitalized the Green Bank, and I can't tell you much more than that. I'd have to look it up. SB 260 is helping transition transportation towards electric vehicles. Apparently, there's a pretty good chunk of change that is currently available to that end. 310 million for infrastructure, 290 million for fleet, 135 million to help start transitioning public fleets. There's also coming down the pipeline HB 21-1286, which is commercial building benchmark. LPEA will be subject to this because we have enough meters to do so. And it's going to require, we're going to have to supply energy conservation and energy usage information for buildings that are 50,000 plus square feet. I did some initial calculations. I can't remember right off the gate, but it looks like about 4 buildings in Archuleta and somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 in La Plata would be subject to that. GHG pollution standards for transportation are being set. There are public meetings being held around the state right now if anybody really has a burning need to find one. Mr. Singer, when he discussed, I thought it was interesting language because he indicated on multiple occasions using the word irrevocable as to decarbonizing the Colorado economy. So he really kind of acknowledged that that is definitely the way the Colorado legislation is going right now. Looking towards the future, there was quite a bit of discussion about wildfire legislation. This is a big one for Colorado cooperatives right now, watching what's going on around the country with wildfire, and some entities in California will say. Worker and labor groups are making a big push for limiting employee transportation miles by allowing e-trips is what they're calling them. Affordable housing is really high up on the agenda. Mental health, tax oversight, wildfire, and microgrid legislation is on the horizon. They were working on strategy-wise a messaging campaign, and I'm sorry I could not find my example of that to give to you, but they have basically 3 bullet points. The first one's reliability. The second one, it looks very much like what we currently already talk about, affordability and reliability and safety and environmental impact. I'll have to find that to be able to supply it to you, but they have been working, so they say, with our communications department to be able to nail that down. Let's see, the communications report, Colorado Country Life is facing very hefty increases in paper and postage, which does not affect us as we are not currently taking Colorado Country Life. However, they're instituting something new called Colorado Country Life Extra, which is an online version that you have to go and actually sign up for. To combat the postage, they're floating an idea at the CREA level, just for your information, of having each individual cooperative pay for its own postage separately. So pull that out of the overall equation and have a new calculation to pay for that. I wrote down the safety department's mission statement because I really liked it, and I really like hearing Dale Kishbaugh's reports for safety. Their mission statement: assisting the co-op in preventing injuries, saving lives, and complying with government regulations. So I just wanted to share that with you. Colorado is currently in the top 5 states in the country for completing our OSHA reports and inspections. So that's pretty good. Those are submitted, by the way, to the co-op as well as in our ECA. There's hazard mitigation grants available right now. However, it looks like it's a pretty extensive process. It's all completely done with FEMA. You have to start through all the way through the finish. We'd have to pay for the expenses and being reimbursed. However, that money is in the pot. So it is available, you know, if we wanted to mitigate something, that grant process is available. Let's see, there was an election for the NRECA regulatory committee election. There was 2 candidates. Debbie Rose of San Isabel, and Barry Springer of Mountain View. And when the dust settled, Miss Debbie Rose was elected to that position. Let's see. Ken Singer has still been participating in the carbon dioxide discussion group at the NRECA level. He is reporting that none of the other states that are participating in that, their managers are not seeing the level of push on carbon action that Colorado is. So he portrayed it as having, you know, some push on him in that perspective, but it's irrevocable. Let's see. I think that those were the biggest points that I wanted to bring to your attention today. So does anybody have any questions? Miss Rachel?
Yeah, I was noting in your report that NRECA opposes the clean energy standard, and I know they kind of have some, well, I have no idea about the politics of Washington, but potentially have some sway there, a lobbying arm, et cetera. And I didn't know, we've brought this up before in other pieces where we do not align with some of the stances taken by these lobbying groups that we are a part of and represent. Jessica, is this kind of a place where that group you all formed of progressive CEOs or progressive co-ops, is that kind of a vision there? Is that you could kind of carve yourselves out and say, actually, NRECA is not representing the entirety of co-op land?
Yeah, it could be. That's a great point. After the opposition to that came out, that NRECA sent, it created a firestorm amongst other co-ops across the United States, not understanding why NRECA took that position instead of more of a collaborative, let's work together approach. So, you know, that new generation cooperative, yeah, that's part of it, is to get a different perspective, you know, diversity of thought heard in public settings. And so that could be an avenue where that group develops a letter to members of Congress saying, well, in fact, we like, you know, we don't have to agree with everything, but you can go in with a sense of, we'd like to work with you on these items, and here's some different perspectives. That could definitely be an opportunity.
Thank you.
Anybody else? I would also refer you to an email I sent out yesterday that I received from CREA in regard to the budget reconciliation process that is underway. And included in that is quite interesting. There's a white paper of bullet points that was developed by the House of Representatives that specifically is showing where they want to send some of that $3.5 trillion in human infrastructure bill, is what they're calling it. It's about page 4 where it starts pertaining specifically to electric cooperatives or vehicles or clean energy. So that is worth taking a look at when you get a chance. And it also includes, that email includes a letter. NRECA is specifically opposing something called the Clean Electricity Payment Program, which would be a piece of that reconciliation budget. And basically the way it was developed was from the, I might give you the wrong years, but basically there's going to be if generation and transmission ratchet up their renewables by 4% every year, they're going to get funding. If they don't, they will start getting sticks. So it's a carrot and stick approach is the way I'm reading it. And so the pushback, there's the letter specifically from NRECA pushing back on that is attached to that email. So if you get a chance to look at it and you have any questions, just shoot them my way and I'll definitely work to address them. That's all I've got then. Thank you.
Okay, pushing on. Thank you very much for that report. Appreciate it. We are gonna, let's finish this out with the Western United, and then we will take a break. So, Kristen, you're up.
Thank you, John. just a couple of highlights. So this is on page 94. That's where the Western United unapproved minutes are. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things. One is that Western United has a employee incentive program that part of their salary actually comes from margins. And so the margins that are distributed to the co-op members, also some of those margins are distributed to their staff. Now, Western United is a corporation. It is not a co-op. So we are a corporation of co-ops as opposed to a co-op of co-ops like Tri-State is. So it's an interesting thing. It seems to work really well for them, and I think it's fairly unique. I also wanted to, I attended I kind of crashed the audit committee. I'm not on any of the committees yet. And good audit. The only thing that was missing was anything along the lines of R402, whether it's in the board policy or it's in the internal policies. There's nothing about a mandatory absence of their key folks, and I'm lobbying for that to get in there. Most folks weren't, because I was asking for what other co-ops did, and a lot of the other co-ops didn't even know what I was talking about. So it's interesting. I think that's important to get that in there. Although Western United really doesn't deal with any cash, they do deal with an awful lot of money in the form of purchase orders and stuff. So there is opportunity there. One of the other board members did say something like they have no reason to be concerned, but maybe that's when you need these kinds of things, because when you have no reason to be concerned, you tend to get complacent. So I thought that was a really good point from him, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name. The last I want to mention is that the fish fry happened. It was fabulous. You guys should all come. It was really low attendance. CREA was up in Granby at the same time that we were down in wherever we were, Commerce City or in the middle of nowhere up north of Denver. So it's very good. It's a really good opportunity to meet with other co-op members, as is the CREA Innovation Summit, which if you guys haven't signed up for that, at least for the online version of it, then I suggest you do. And that's it. I will entertain questions on this fascinating corporation. Okay, that's it, John. Back to you.
Okay, so it is 12:08. And we are at the end of our reports. And the way the schedule is currently laid out is that we are supposed to take a lunch break at 12:30 and then be back at 1, which is when our outside counsel comes back online. So we are essentially headed in. We have a little extra time here. So what I would propose, unless Jessica or anybody else on the board has a different suggestion, is that we return back. We take a little bit more than a half hour and return back at 12:50 so that we have 10 minutes to clean up the one item we didn't get done at the beginning of the meeting. And that's the travel policy. So you have an extra few minutes. Please review that and be prepared to vote or make a decision or have a discussion, however you guys want to play it, to round out the travel and training request that was pulled out of the consent board items. Okay, does that work for everybody? Okay, so we will see you back here at 12:50 sharp, ready to discuss travel and training, and then we will hear from the attorney and then go pretty much into executive session. Fair warning, we expect executive session to be a long one. So coffee up. See you shortly. Okay, welcome back. Everybody on screens. Okay. All right, so let's return to the agenda item that was removed from the consent. So we're going to do this one individually. Let's just get a motion up and running here so that we can have a discussion if one is needed. So we need a motion to approve the travel and expense requests.
So moved by Kohler.
I'm going to second.
I'll second, Bill.
There we go. Sue gets it. All right. So discussion. Kirsten, Sue.
Yeah, just real quick. Mine got approved in August, so mine's back in the August tab, and I'm not looking for reapproval. And I just want to make sure I've got that process right. I don't need to re-ask this, even though it's for the future.
Yeah, once it's been approved, it should be approved until you attend.
Okay, and that's why it's sitting in the August tab, is because that was when it was approved. Okay, super. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think, but that's part of the policy is that if you know something ahead of time, like oftentimes there's bulk hotel discounts or bulk travel discounts, like if you're going to a national conference or something like that. So the policy encourages getting this request in advance to be able to take advantage of that bulk buying power. So I think that's a great point to bring up, Kirsten.
Great. Thank you. Okay, anything else? Any other, any other points of discussion? Okay, so all in favor, hold your hand up for aye. Say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? All abstained? Okay, the motion passes. Okay, we're a few minutes early here, but I suggest we head in. Hang on 1 second here. Yeah, so we're a couple minutes early for our outside board member, but I think we're going to sit tight for 7 minutes because I think he will want to present. Normally he presents publicly for a few minutes before we go into executive session. So I think going into executive session would not make sense. Does that sound right on sequencing, Jessica? Or
yes,
Graham?
and I just texted to see if he can join us now.
Okay, terrific. All right, in the meantime, do we have an open, Tim, did you have a comment?
Yeah, earlier we talked about information from our board meeting that's posted on the website someplace. I've kind of lost track of like what is, I think they were using the term outward facing information from the packet.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what is and isn't, and I'm also not very certain that I can find it on the website. So perhaps being able to do that in some way, clarify that at some meeting upcoming so we all know that, that would be really helpful.
Yeah, I agree with you, Tim. I think we can take that offline and tighten that up a little bit so that there's absolute clarity on what is and is not public. Both it's sort of easy to sort of conceptualize in our head, find it, and so when we are speaking, when we make a statement that says, oh, something's public, you can look it up if you want, that statement is true, or at least darn likely to be true. So, but let's take that offline and figure out the best way to do that. That may just be a simple education or notation. There's a bunch of ways you could solve that. So let's not try to solve that right now. But I think you're right. We do need to solve that. So it's at least clear on what we're doing.
Thanks.
Okay. Kirsten, go ahead.
Yeah. Hey, thanks, John. Hey, Jessica, I'm wondering, since we have a couple of minutes, if we could hear some of the stuff that's going on in Pagosa and or over in that other area, as far as operational, what big projects are going on, any challenges, any cool stuff that we could hear about. I know we see some of that. I'd just like to hear from folks.
Sure. Maybe Dan, I mean, those are more the capital big project items. And unless Garrett wants to also kind of give a quick update.
Sure.
But quick, Garrett, because we've got Matt joining soon.
So the majority of the summer so far has been the crews are working on a job out in Hatcher area. It's an underground cable replacement job that we recently finished. So now the crews are moving up County Road 400 up by Lost Valley, San Juan's, and we're replacing about another 1.5 miles of underground cable up in that area. So that's been keeping us busy along with the new construction, trying to juggle all that. But that's pretty much what we've been up to all summer. Maintenance, pole change outs, still working on tree trimming and fire mitigation. But in a nutshell, that was kind of what we've been up to over here.
Yeah, and just to add, because Kirsten, it's a good question, because in the past, and I wish Jerry was on the call too, but in the past, our crews were really doing more operation and maintenance work. And I know when I started 2 years ago, predominantly what I heard from the linemen where they were very bored and why couldn't they do the bigger capital projects? Because it's good to know that work and it's exciting and it's technical and it helps, keep these guys honed in on their skills as well. So we transitioned away from using contractors because the company had gone towards a lot of contractors for a while. So we transitioned away from contractors doing that work and started letting our line workers do more of that capital work. And so I know they're having a great time doing it, but they're learning a lot. And we're actually saving a significant amount of money by using our own crews, because as Carl mentioned this to me, what we'd had to do is we had to pay contract crews, but we'd have to go out and get loans to pay for the contract crews because it was capital work. So not only were we paying the wages of the contract crews, but we are also paying the interest rate on the loans they were getting to pay for those. So in working with the crews and Carl, we nixed that. And we said, we're only going to use contract crews where we're too busy and we can't get it done, maybe doing some maintenance and operation work, but really reworking it so that our crews have that opportunity, but it also saved us a lot of money.
Terrific. Also, I'm sorry, did you have more, Kirsten? Great. As also note, a couple people, we myself included, were struggling with links to where we're supposed to be when, if anybody doesn't have the executive session link now, please communicate either with Drew or Jessica directly so that we can all move in and out. See if I can get it right this time myself. Just happy I got the time right. Okay. All right, well, let's just sit tight until, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see you, Joe. Go ahead.
Just a quick question. Jessica, is the fire mitigation work, I'm assuming that's done by contractors, right?
Well, we have tree trimming crews that are done by contractors, but when we replace out hardware on our lines that help with fire mitigation, like bird protection, that's typically done by our crews. Sometimes we'll have the contractors do that if they're going up and doing some other maintenance, but it's typically our crews doing that work. And then definitely we contract out our tree trimming.
Okay, and is that really the lion's share of the work is the tree trimming? Is that what really takes up most of the time and money on this?
Well, I and Carl helped me with this because it is a significant amount. However, some of the equipment is very expensive to switch out. So a lot of our switching gear that helps with, moving energy efficiently around if there's a fire so that we avoid energized lines in a fire because that causes more fires. That equipment is very expensive as well, though. So oftentimes it could add up to more than what we're paying the contractors.
Okay. Yeah, I would
Yeah, good
agree with
question.
that, Jessica. For some reason, my camera's not working now. So hopefully you can hear me. But yeah, the kind of tree trimming has been ramped up, but that's very much, you know, business as usual. That's something we do every year. But the increased focus, both in terms of our expenses and our capital on fire mitigation, is significant increase over last year.
All right, I think Matt is somewhere on. Hold on. He is dialing in now. We won't be able to see him, but he should be here in a minute. Janelle, Matt, or Janelle and Drew, can you resend him the link just to make sure he has the right one?
Yes, I sent both of them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, while we're waiting, guys, I'm not going to be able to be at either of the appreciation events. I'm sorry, and I'm actually more sorry to our members instead of. I need to apologize to you guys because you guys are tired of seeing my face. But I'm sorry I won't be there for you members. All two of you who are attending now. Thank you, Elizabeth and Emily. Life gets in the way sometimes. Thanks.
Hillary, how many people do we have registered for those events?
We don't do registrations for the member appreciation lunch. It's just show up if you can, stay as long as you want kind of thing.
Yeah, I won't be making either. I have to travel. So maybe that'll attract more people.
Oh, I'm changing my mind. I can go now since Tim's not going to be there.
Good one, Kirsten.
Sorry, he's having technical difficulties getting on. Not sure what's going on. We've been having some issues with Zoom lately too. Any other questions?
It just seems to be this season. I don't think anybody on this call has not struggled in the last 30 days with at least something. It just seems like I think it's the internet. It's solar flares. Kohler, on the subject of solar flares, you're up.
Hey, just one quick question. We were talking about policies earlier and how to go in and put our comments. I'm having a hard time finding where that is. Is that in the drive? And if so, where in the drive is it?
Kohler, yeah, it's on Google Drive. And I'm driving to it right now just to be able to tell you.
It's in committee documents.
There
should be a specific folder for board committees and a specific subfolder for committee on policies.
Hey, I'm going to cut you off. Matt's on.
Okay.
And he
got
charges
it
by the minute. So
I'll get you, Kohler.
Okay.
Thank you.
Matt, thanks for joining. Understand you don't have any video, but the floor is yours.
Yeah, hey guys, I'm sorry that I don't have video. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
And you don't have any audio either.
You can hear me okay?
Yep. We can hear you.
Great. So I think we got a pretty quick public update for purposes of today. Sorry for the technical difficulties in getting on. The Adams County case is kind of same status as it was last time. No big updates there. And then really the other big piece is on the FERC side. Continuing to move forward with both the CTP case as well as the partial buy down case. Those cases remain in a settlement posture. And in addition to that, a response, second response to the show cause order that's due on Friday. So we're in the process of putting that together, where we'll be responding to the latest iteration of their exit charges that they put together, which I think, as many of you saw, the numbers.
Matt, we lost you. All right. I think the point is that there's not much to report as additional movement that can be talked about in the public session. Oh, there you are, Matt. Are you there?
Yeah, sorry, I don't know where you guys stopped hearing me. Apologies, I got bad audio out here. But yeah, we have this filing due Friday, and we'll be responding to the latest iteration of the tri-state buyout numbers. And that's really the biggest item that, to just this point, we can talk about publicly today.
Okay.
Is there any questions from you guys on where things are from anyone else?
Kirsten had her hand up. Why don't you go ahead?
Yeah, I just want to note that Ken Singer just joined our attendees list, so from CREA. So obviously he's interested in this part of the public part, but I agree. There's probably not much more we can talk about right now.
The cases are all under settlement privilege at FERC, and then the Adams County case is really where it was previously.
Okay, any other questions or comments from Matt in the public session? Okay, then absent any additional questions, then we need a motion to move to executive session.
Donnelly moves.
I saw Bob Lynch first. Tim Wheeler second, it looked like. All opposed, or excuse me, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed. Any objection or any abstentions? Terrific. We will see you on the other side.
Hey, before you leave, can I get my status on this, please?
Thank you. Thanks for the call out. Yeah, Jessica, what's your grammar? Jessica, what's your guidance here?
Yes, Cole, you'll have to recuse yourself because these are active settlement negotiations at FERC, which is what we've had you do in the past.
And then when you're done, you'll go back into other things that I can participate in. Is that correct?
Correct.
So if you would please call me instead of text me, my text alert is not working. So if you call me, I'll be back on. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Kohler, for that. And we will see you, the rest of you, on the other side.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you all for an executive session. There were no action items that came out of that executive session. So absent any additional items, then we'll go ahead and adjourn the meeting, but I believe we still have, we have one hand up. Kohler, did you have your hand up for a comment or question?
I do. I have a comment. I know our annual meeting is on October the 6th and that evening. That's also the Tri-State Board meeting. Sometimes they go long, sometimes they don't. I do not want to miss that, but I might not have a choice. So just to give you a heads up, I'm going to do everything I can to be there. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks, Kohler. Dan, comments, thoughts?
Yeah, I'd just like to maybe make a comment here on the broadband idea. The industrial customer out in my area is taxed with rebuilding the county road, repaving the county road. And CenturyLink come up with the bright idea that they were going to make them rebury their cable and stuff coming into their T1 line, going to cost thousands of dollars. They said, no way we're going to do that. And now they're getting internet, Wi-Fi to the mine there for all their internet plus their voice over. So they did away with CenturyLink. So that was, and they're getting better service, faster speeds and whatnot. And it's too bad we didn't have or fiber run down that 3-phase line, because they'd have tied right into it, because it comes right into that customer. And I'm just wondering if my connection's better now too, because I got to tie into that also. I'm getting uploads of over 30 and downloads of 20, 24, 25. So hopefully my connection's better. And it is fast track based.
Your connection's better and you're better looking now too, Dan, on the calls.
I don't know what happened there.
Clearer picture, maybe.
Okay.
Dan, can you say who you're getting service from then? Which company?
It's a company out of Mancos, Nimbus.
Mancos. Huh, okay.
What did you say the name was, Dan?
Nimbus. Nimbus. Yeah.
Yes, NIMBUS. They've got a tower up on Madden, and they're serving quite a few customers out in our area. Plus the Cortez, Mancos, Dove Creek area.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Any last words here?
Sorry, I couldn't get my hand up in time. Just want to thank John.
Ahead, Joe.
I want to thank John for kind of slowing the meeting down and letting a lot of discussion happen. And we're still an hour early too, so it didn't impinge on too much there. But thanks, John. Appreciate you doing that.
Well, it's nice of you to say, but thank you. I appreciate that.
Why does John's thing say Ted Compton on it?
I have no idea. Oh, because Sue and I just dialed into the wrong account, and then Ted just texted me the number. There we go. Okay. May all of our technologies woes end soon. So, and on that note, thank you very much. Appreciate everybody's hard work, and we will see you online and around about in town. This meeting is adjourned. Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.
Thank you. Adios.
Thank you.